If you could grab a seat, that would be wonderful. Glad you're all chatting and meeting old friends and making new ones. That's part of why we do this, is networking. We want you to find resources and helps that will benefit you. So hopefully you made it here, and if you took the stairs, you got your workout today, so you can have an extra donut. So take that if you'd like to, but I'm just going to give you a few introductions of what's going on, the folks that are here, and then we're available to help any way we can. You can stop back at the registration table if you have questions as well. Most everything is on this floor. We have one session that's on the second floor, and that's the only one. Everything else is taking place up here, so it should be pretty easy. The men's restroom is right to the right, and the ladies' restroom is as you came to the top of the stairs, right to your right from there. Or if you leave the auditorium, it's the first hallway to your left. The bathroom is there. The beverages in the cooler, you might have to dig because they're layered down there. So if you want sodas, I think they're further down. We're making you work for the sugar, and the water's on the top there. So. And then we'll keep the coffee flowing, and we'll have a changeover from breakfast to have some chips and granola bars and things like that. I know it's kind of nice to nibble on stuff along the way when you're sitting and absorbing. It's nice to have something to do along the way with, holy cow, wow. I see bright lights, so. Yeah, swim towards it, thank you. So that's the bathrooms on the floor here that we have, and if you want hot water, the hot water would be in the kitchen, which is in the back of the overflow, and that's where everything's taking place, is here in the overflow. This is the auditorium if it says AUD on the schedule, and then overflow, that's what we use on Sunday mornings when we fill up here, so we just call it the overflow. I don't know any fancy names or titles, so we should probably name it something better, but that's right off, again, right as you get to the top of the stairs, take a right, and then there's a little kitchen there if you'd want some hot water. We do have some tea and hot cocoa if you prefer that over coffee also. My name's John Buckley. I'm the pastor here at Upper Perk Community Church, and we're glad to be able to host this in conjunction with Access Services. We started doing these summits. This is probably our fourth one, I'm going to guess, that we've had, and it's awesome to see the good turnout. We hope that you will leave here feeling like you wish there was more, not that you're worn out by what we have. So my hope also is that you wish you can make every session. Our goal next year is to be able to tape more things. We are live streaming this now. I didn't want to tell that to anybody in case it didn't work, because technology is not always workable. So we're going to be sending that out. So if you have friends that weren't able to make it and you want to let them know on UPCC Films, we have a link there, or you can go to Facebook, the Upper Perk Community Church Facebook page. They'll be both streaming there during the time. All the general sessions will be taking place there. So just to go over the schedule, if you got your packet right inside, there's lots of great information in there. And so I want you to be able to look through that, but just the schedule so you know what's happening. After we're done here with our part, we're trying to make sure we leave breaks in between everything so you have chances to look at the information up here, to chat with people. The very first session will be up here with James Mast, the impact of social media. And Derek Whalen, where are you at? Can you get your mic? And I'm just going to have James introduce himself and give a little quick blurb so that you know a face to a name in an organization, and we'll do that for all the speakers and then any of the other organizations here. So take it away, James.
I'm James Mast. I'm in private practice as a psychotherapist. I did work at Penn Foundation for 10 years, and I'm an adjunct professor at Eastern University in the psychology department for things like psychopathology and social psychology. And I think that about does it.
Great. Thanks, James. And he's got our first session there, the impact of social media on mental health. And then accessing and navigating mental health services, the ins and outs of finding help, is Anna Trout. She's way over here, Derek, so we're going to keep you moving.
Hi, my name's Anna. I work for the Montgomery County Office of Mental Health, and in that role I oversee our crisis and diversion programs for mental health, and so thanks for having me here today.
Awesome.
And I'm also your neighbor. I live in Upper Hanover, so this feels very special to be here.
Great to have you. Yes, we were talking about all the connections and people she might know, and so it's great to have her. And she'll be in the overflow during our first session. And then we'll have our breakout at 9:15, chance to go to the restroom, grab another snack, talk with somebody, see a table. And then at 9:30 is our second session. And the Whitmers are here, and they are, not only are they here going to be speaking, but they also have a ministry they just started. So they're right in front of you, Derek, though, Toby and Amy. So I'll let them just introduce themselves. They came from the furthest, I think, so.
Hi, I'm Toby. This is Amy Whitmer, and we are from Newark, Delaware. I was a pastor there for 21 years. Amy's a teacher in a high school. I was also a honorary commander with the Delaware State Police. I still am and serve on a board to advise Newcastle County. And in 8 months ago, our daughter committed suicide. And out of the ashes has sprung Safe Helps Group. It's the Butterfly, and a nonprofit, a faith-based nonprofit that we are trying to help those who are on that journey and to prevent suicide, educate the greater church and the greater community about the road that leads to suicide, and to comfort survivors of suicide.
Awesome. Thank you, Toby and Amy. Glad to have you here. And they'll be here in the auditorium second session. And then Lauren Kuhlewend. I know Lauren's here, way over here, Derek. I tried to put all the speakers as far as we could so that Derek would get extra steps in. Derek's one of our pastors at the church here, so we get to do everything. So
happy to help you get your steps in today, Derek.
Yes.
So my name is Lauren Kuhlewend. I am a almost licensed professional counselor, and I work at Robin Downs & Associates. We have a location located in Quakertown, PA, and I've been practicing for about 3.5 years.
awesome. And Lauren had the shortest journey here. She's a block away, so yes, so she had the farthest and shortest in the same session. So we're excited to have Lauren. And then the last session, with Mark Borse, who's way in the back. Mark's standing, so he can even walk towards you, Derek. So.
Hi, I'm Mark Borse. I'm the Director of Program Development at Access Services, and I've been here at probably all four of my things. Yeah. John keeps letting me come back. He keeps threatening to not, but he doesn't let me come
I want
back.
that card on the table.
Right. So I'm gonna talk about boundaries. If you've lived through the pandemic, you know that your boundaries got messed up. And so I think what happened one of the things is we realized that boundary issues are all the time for all of us, but now we're paying attention to them a little bit differently. So we're going to just talk through that together a little bit. Thanks.
Awesome. And then myself and Vicki Chandler up here, Derek, are going to be speaking. I'll let Vicki introduce herself. This will be during session 3.
Thanks. My name is Vicki Chandler, and I started my career in '76 in special education, wound up teaching at Cairn. Some of you know Cairn. I was an adjunct there teaching special ed courses. And my husband and I have 2 sons, and our oldest son back in 1996 had his first psychotic episode, break from reality. He had another one later. And so I'm here just to give the perspective of what it's like, how it impacts family members, and what you can do to help.
Awesome.
Glad to be
Thank
here.
you, Vicki. We're glad to have you here. And you're going to hear from Dave in a minute, who's going to be speaking in the third session as well. And so that covers our speakers. We also have some tables up here represented that they're not speaking, but they have information and resources that can help you. So I'm just going to start with my list, which Clarence Murray. Derek, can you hand Clarence the microphone right there? Right there, Clarence, right next to you. There you go.
It's Derek. Hi, my name is Clarence. I'm here representing counseling ministry here at UPCC called Through the Valley, or TVM. If you want to know more information about that, it started off with just providing counseling services for members of our church that has since opened up to the community. So if you want to know more information about that, feel free to reach out. And there's also a brochure up there as well with the phone number and the email address. All right, thank you.
And we have bags, so you can take all the other materials and have a bag to take it with you. So it's been neat how God's developed that counseling ministry. We're in the midst of, on our first floor, what used to be a pizza shop, we're converting into a community counseling center. So we're in the midst of raising funds and doing projects. Hopefully that will be up and running in June, and that'll be a physical location. We have the counseling ministry going just in the building. It'll be nice for them to have their own footprint in the building here. So we're grateful to the Lord for that. And then we have Connection. If the name sounds familiar, we have Deb. You go by Deb or Debbie? Where's right there? Oh, you're right by your husband. So way up here, Dave. By Dave, not. Debbie is not only married to Dave Eckhart, but she's also representing. I'll let you take it from there.
Hi, I'm from Living Streams Ranch. My name's Debbie Ecker. I'm the Program Development Director there. We serve women and children ages 8 to 12, and then women and girls 13 and older. And then we just help individuals who've been struggling with life challenges and trauma. to find hope and healing through Christ. We have horses who are our partners in our work, and through that connection, we're able to help draw out a lot of truths that help them learn about trust and boundaries and just establishing healthy relationships. So we would love to just talk with you about what we do. You can get some information, sign up, come check us out, have a tour, learn about what we're doing so you can share with others, or if you, for yourself or anyone you know that it could be helpful for. We also recruit for volunteers, so if you know people who love being outside, love working with animals, we might be a good fit for you.
Awesome, thank you. And then we also have Mary Young with Project Live. I know Mary's way over here, so space those people out there. This is great. You didn't realize how strategic I was, did you, Derek? So.
Hi, good morning. I'm Mary Young with Project Live Up a Perk. We're the community coalition that works to bring agencies and other groups within the Valley to address the issues around substance use disorder. So we're an all-volunteer group. Focusing mostly on prevention, but we do have a recovery group that meets Tuesday evenings at the Open Link Senior Center on Jefferson Street. We've got information over there about what we're doing. We're part of the Montgomery Alliance of Prevention Coalitions, and that's pretty much it.
Awesome.
May I
You can just
this
hand it right over to Mary Ann.
Mary Ann?
Mary Ann Lynch is the new director of the Open Link, which is our social services agency, and I'll let her take it from there.
Hi, yeah, I'm Mary Ann Lynch. I'm the executive director of the Open Link. We know that a lot of times that economic issues can impact mental health, and so we are the social services organization within the Valley. We provide a food pantry, we have GED classes, we do GED testing. We also provide counseling and economic assistance with utilities and rent. And we also have DV services. So if you know anyone who's experiencing DV, we work very closely with law enforcement and with other services within the community that can help in that respect. And we run a senior center, and we do a lot of senior programming too. So, so we know that isolation can affect our seniors in particular. And so we do lunch every day. We also deliver a pantry to a lot of our seniors in the community too. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary Ann. I think I covered everybody. If I missed somebody, let me know, and we'll have another opportunity. I think I checked the boxes, but that does happen from time to time. So before we dismiss and break out, and if you have any questions, I'll make sure I hang out up front for a couple of minutes after we dismiss things. I did fail to mention the third session with Dave. During the third session, the session that Dave Eckert will be leading is on our second floor, because we have 3 sessions that hour. So you'll go down the stairs or take the elevator down 1 floor, and we'll have some folks guiding you to the area that will be in. That's the only one on the second floor. Everything else is up here on the 3rd floor today. So Dave, I'm gonna let you share your part, and then we'll dismiss everybody to the sessions.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, guys, for coming out early on a Saturday morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dave Eckert, and I direct Intersect, which is one of the partners that is putting on this summit. Intersect supports people at the intersection of faith and mental health through consultation, training, and then fostering collaboration between faith communities and human service providers. And there's a lot of reasons that we're doing this event this morning. We want you to walk away with specific skills, tools for talking about this issue in your own churches. But I'll share just one brief story, and then we're gonna have you guys go out to your classes about why we do this. I was once moderating a discussion between a group of mental health professionals and clergy. And as the conversation was going on, the clergy in this room of 40 mental health professionals said, "I didn't even know you guys existed." And then when I was talking to some of the mental health professionals, they said, "I have never been in a conversation like this before with people from these churches, even though they were all serving the same community." So our real desire today is that by having us all in the room together, people from the county sector and the private sector and faith communities, that we would be able to collaborate for the common good in ways that we would not have been able to had we not gathered this morning. My talk in session 3 is going to be about how do we support people with mental health struggles, and we'll look at 5 specific skills that can help you to do that. But it's just about 8:30. We want to get you into your classes. But this is a faith and mental health summit. So would you pause with me for just a word of prayer that God might be moving in our time together? Father, thank you that you care about people. You didn't just create this world, but you love this world, and you love the people in this room who are going through things that we just have no idea about. But people are here early on a Saturday morning because either they're walking through some real hard times or they're walking with people who are going through some real significant challenges. And I pray that you would meet them where they are this morning and that you would connect them with just the right people, just the right class, just the right truth, just the right resource that will help them in their journey. Thank you for the ultimate way in which you showed your self-sacrificial love for us through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. It's in his name we pray. Amen. You can go ahead to the class you want to be at, and thanks again for coming this morning.
Hello. We'll go ahead and get started. This is the impact of social media and technology, although it's been kind of repackaged and renamed a few times. Now it's the technology and social media boundaries class. When I started doing mental health seminars, there were a couple obvious talks in the community. There was mental health in general. There was the suicide identification and prevention talk, trauma, all things that I kind of assumed as I was becoming a young therapist that I would be talking about that. But I wasn't quite aware how important the talk on technology and social media would become as it relates to mental health. But out of all the talks, this one probably gets the most traction and is the most interested, has the most interest for when I give it. I think it says something about the importance of it. I don't have a clicker today, so I'm just going to kind of do a pointer every time we're ready to go. I gave a little bit of a background already. I won't spend too much time on the bio. You know, I'm married. I have a daughter who's 5. Some of these technology subjects are becoming a little more relevant at this point as we're moving from Daniel Tiger to other content. And yeah, I worked at Eastern University and Penn Foundation for quite some time, and I attend a little church in Norristown called Methacton. But I really like intersecting with different organizations, faith communities, because there's just so much to be appreciated when it comes to overlap between what works in mental health and what works in scripture and in faith. And so it's a neat thing to talk on. But And now an introduction to kind of get us grounded on where we're at with this whole technology thing. Before we hear it, I just want you to know that an AI wrote this introduction for me. I just said, I'm giving this talk to a group of people. They're people of faith. It's on the subject of technology and social media. I'm James. Take it away.
In today's modern world, advances in technology have enabled humans to live more connected lives than ever before. Faith leaders have a unique opportunity to use technologies such as social media to spread their message and build relationships with their congregants. However, with the rise of technology, there is an increased need for faith leaders to educate their congregants on how to use technology ethically, particularly when it comes to setting healthy boundaries with technology in their lives. This seminar is meant to help faith leaders learn what ethical use of technologies, like social media, looks like, to help their congregants implement healthy boundaries with technology in their lives. James will support his suggestions by looking at the current research on technology and its effects on mental health, and by examining the implications of this issue for faith leaders. In the next few hours, we will explore the concept of technology addiction, the impact of social media on mental health, and the role of faith leaders in setting boundaries with technology. Back to you, James.
Thank you, ChatGPT. You know, isn't that a little like, it's cool, but it's a little disturbing at the same time? Like, I like to give that as an intro because it's kind of really anchors us where we're at with technology. When I gave this talk last time, it was to another group of faith leaders, and it was a few hours. It was a longer sort of breakout discussion. But AI was just starting to come out, and now we're a little further down the rabbit hole. And to be honest, I think I'm not quite aware of what the implications will be of all that, although I'm pretty confident there will be some with things. And so here's an interesting idea. The devil can't make you sin, but if the devil can't make you sin, he'll make you busy. That's a quote from Comer's The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Great book if you haven't read it. And Comer's a faith leader himself and captures a lot of interesting ideas and information about the age we live in, which is an age of, you might say, hurry sickness a lot of times. And to go into a little more detail about that, you know, we're living in what you might refer to as the age of mass multimedia. And different metrics, research point at different realities about how this affects our lives. And one study says the average American spends between 10 and 12 hours a day on a media device of some kind. You might think, well, not me, that seems excessive. But when you think about it, if we're talking about media devices in general, there's usually not many hours in the day where there's not some hum of electronic something in the background, whether that's music, whether that's television. Even now, we are experiencing a seminar, but it's also a media experience, as we have PowerPoint and different technologies at play as well. And so actually the statistic is not far-fetched, in my opinion. People touch their phones a lot. In the book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, Comer says that one piece of research says the average iPhone user touches their phone 2,617 times a day. And again, they might seem excessive, but there's many times when we're holding a phone or when we're tapping it or every time we type in something on a text that all sort of adds up in a way. So what's social media? Because technology is one thing, a piece of technology, but social media is something else. There's two definitions here. Social media, from Merriam's dictionary, refers to a form of electronic communication, such as websites, social networking, or microblogging, through which users create online communities to share information, ideas, personal messages, and other content. I also like this really random definition by some person on Twitter named Rumbles. It says it's a place to hang out and communicate with your own network of contacts, friends, and peers about stuff that interests you. It's a little more concise, I think, actually. So I kind of like that one. You know, you might recognize some of these symbols. These are just some of the most popular social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram. You might be thinking, what's this one in the corner? My wife comes from an Eastern European background. She came from Russia originally, and this is actually a very popular form of Facebook that they use over there, but also very widespread. Social media has always been around, right? Like big flat screen TVs, that's something new, but you know, there was vintage social media. You had like your sticky pads, you'd write something on and put that on the wall. YouTube might have been the window that you just look out, see what's going on. And you might think to yourself, how many social media devices or platforms or accounts do you use? 1 or 2? 3? More than 3? A lot of people these days land in the more than 3 direction with things. A lot of people are more connected, not just because they want to be, but it's almost become kind of integrated into what you need to do with different types of work, with even at school. I mean, one of the things that is more typical these days is that they'll give your child an iPad when they come in. That's kind of a fascinating, potentially scary evolution in what standard educational practice is, and there's reasons for it, but it has implication. Percentage of U.S. population who currently use any social media, 2008 to 2017. And if your eyesight is going, that bottom blue square is 24% of Americans in 2008, and in 2017, 81% were using some sort of social media. Why it's increased exponentially. By the way, this is pre-pandemic. Anyone have any theories about how the pandemic affected how we use devices? Did anyone know what Zoom was before the pandemic? No, it's a very common lingo. It's like word of the year. Digital use around the world, and I'm really belaboring this point, but it's very popular. You know, look at one statistic here. You know, active social media users worldwide, 53% of the planet uses social media. That's a pretty high percentage. That's 4.14 billion people on planet Earth. All right. So all of that is just to make the case, and you know, when you're talking about things, it's good to make a case, supporting it with some sort of evidence, that it's no longer a question of whether or not technology and social media affects our lives. It's really more of a question of how does it affect our lives, because we know that it does with those sorts of statistics out there. You know, the benefits of social media are fairly obvious, and I don't spend a lot of time talking about them because they're explicit. You know, a lot of economy happens online these days. You can stay connected, and that's not a bad thing. You know, I do that with people. It can be fun. Actually, I met my wife on a dating app. So chemistry.com, anyone ever hear of that? I always joke because he's a science teacher, and I'm like, were you on the right website? But there's lots of things to appreciate about social media. In fact, anyone recognize this guy, Fred Rogers? Well, I have a 5-year-old, and I got to say, it was a real pleasure revisiting a lot of the content that Mr. Rogers put out as we were trying to find some developmentally on-target things for her to occasionally watch. And that was also kind of happening during the pandemic, and I was like, wow, I really needed that message today, Mr. Rogers, thank you. See you in the neighborhood later. But there's an interesting video that I'm not going to show today, but I might if we had more time, of Mr. Rogers petitioning Congress for funds to PBS. And he makes the case of how important this sort of use of media can be to educate children how to talk about their feelings, how to deal with life's big issues as they were seeing television atrocities happening. And he makes a compelling case and gets the funding. And I think it's worth a look, actually. So how has technology and social media been useful to your faith community is a question. Where would you advocate for its use? You know, this isn't a purely negative seminar. This is, let's acknowledge that there's two sides to everything. And it's an interesting thing to think about, like where would it be effective using technology of different kinds? I think this is being live streamed, right? Yeah, so that would be like one example. But the hidden costs of technology and social media use are best thought about as like the image of an iceberg, right? If the benefits are rather explicit, that piece of the iceberg that's above the surface, then I think it's useful to think about how the hidden part, the costs, the impacts, are the larger portion of the iceberg that is submerged under the surface, and in some ways harder to track for us all. So I gotta say, this is not like a new area of research. You know, there's been technology and social media out now for a long time, like decades. And so there's actually like a huge amount of research out there that associates technology use with mental health statistics and outcomes. And just in a general way, studies have shown that the more time that people spend on their social media, the more unhappy they tend to become. Employees that were allowed to use Facebook at work became less happy over the time compared to employees who were not allowed to use Facebook at work in one study. And that's just one study. We're talking about like 1,000 studies here that substantiate this very similar idea. And teenagers that use social media more than 2 hours a day tend to show tendencies towards mental health disorders like anxiety or depression. It tends to elevate after a certain amount of time. It's like anything, right? Like you take in a certain dose of it and it's okay, like vitamins are like that, but actually if you get a little too much of something in your system, it can actually start to make you sick in a way. It's like we kind of know that about cupcakes. It's like, okay, if I ate 27 of them, I'm gonna have a stomach ache. But we don't think so intuitively about that when it comes to social media or technology, that if we consume a certain amount, that there's going to be some sort of sick that starts happening. So one of the things that's always worth talking about, and you know, I'm a psychotherapist, so I'm always interested in the way that people view themselves. The lens in which we see not just ourselves, but the world and other people is, well, kind of important. You know, it's also the lens we use to view God and what is the meaning of things. And in general, I'm going to make a very overly simplistic explanation of the importance of this lens, but you know, people can kind of have a positive lens for things, that you know, the world is in general okay, you know, God's got providence, things happen for a reason here. And there can be sort of a more negative view of a lens, you know, or lens, which is, you know, I think it's chaos out there, it's dog-eat-dog world. I'm not really a good person. I don't think anyone's a good person, actually. You know, these are ideas that even if they're not said explicitly, often will sort of underpin a lot of what we do, how we think, what we feel day to day. And one of the things that's always important to think about in this topic is the curation of the online self. And by that, you might recognize some of these little thumbs up icons, right? We might be getting some now on live stream, depending on how I'm doing. Any? Hearts? Don't tell me. Over time, people start to learn what parts of themselves people like and what parts of themselves people don't tend to like or respond to in a positive way. Lots of likes for awesome-looking bowls of pasta and maybe cool vacations. Maybe not so many likes for posts about feeling overwhelmed or struggling in science class that day. The idea here is that the resulting beliefs can be kind of shaped through these experiences because we are social creatures, right? We exist in feedback loops when it comes to every relationship that we're around. Okay. So the cost of curating ourselves for social media is that we begin pushing more and more of ourselves into the category of unacceptable based upon what those feedback loops can be. Another thing that is sort of a psychology concept but has relevance to this conversation is this idea of an internal versus external locus of control. You know, it's the idea that what happens in life, how much agency do we have in our own life? When there's a job in front of me, do I have the ability to pursue it? Am I able to actually take action to better my chances at taking that job? And what research shows, and there's a conversation here for faith leaders and people with faith about God's position in all this, but research tends to show that people that have a general sense that they can have some agency in their life, that they have some sort of internal locus of control, tend to do a little better in terms of health outcomes, mental health outcomes. The reasons are kind of obvious, right? Like it would kind of stink to live in a world where you don't have any agency whatsoever. Like everything that happens is like happening to you in a way. It's kind of a recipe for anxiety, right? In a lot of ways. All right, go. So people with an external locus of control are more likely to feel anxious, depressed, you know, the idea of how much control do they have over their life. Another thing to think about with all of this is there are critical stages of development in all of our lives. And this has relevance to everything I've been talking about to this point, right? Because it means something different to be a 37-year-old person out there using social media and experiencing all of the things involved with that than it does, say, a 15-year-old person. Because developmentally, what's happening, what the important issues are very different. You know, when you're a toddler, there are certain tasks that you're trying to accomplish, right? Sometimes it's just mastering what this thing is called my body. Like I'm trying to like move about the world, get some sort of agency in my space. When we're teenagers, you know, and you might remember this, or you might be experiencing this if you're a teenager, it's a lot about identity formation. You know, that is the time where there's a wrestling with who am I? How do I think? What do I believe? And naturally, there's sort of a trying on of different hats as we sort of try to figure all of that out. You know, I'm in my family, yes, and I'm part of them, but how am I different than my family? These are all sort of dilemmas that are being navigated during a critical stage of development called adolescence. And so when you think about the whole idea of a shaping effect, right, of online feedback shaping what it is we feel or think, what I'm saying is that there's more impact potentially for adolescents and people of certain ages than there is, say, adults. You might have sort of a solidified idea of who you are. Like, in my life now, I like tweed, right? I got a couple tweeds. It's sort of the trappings of psychotherapy, right? You boost your outcomes at least 5% by wearing a tweed coat. So it's like, is that gonna change? No, that's who I am. But, you know, for a teenager, there might be different shifts along the way, and that's not unusual. I went a little far on that point, but so social media use influences the trajectory of child development. Sense of self-worth is the idea there. And the natural response to feeling less than or unworthy is correcting action, right? Because who wants to be anxious? Who wants to feel agitated, depressed? And yes, there's an app for that, so don't worry. Now, Snapchat was one of the first apps, technologies that started using what's sometimes referred to as augmented reality technology, meaning like you can put on a thing called a filter. Have you ever tried this? I mean, this is kind of, I've spent some time myself like playing around with this, and it can give you like antlers or something, and it's kind of cute, right? But, you know, there's also sort of a hidden dark side of that as well, because these technologies can also, say, make your complexion look clearer, or in some cases, they'll actually adjust your very bone structure in your face or in how you look. Pretty significant tweaks. And what's interesting in terms of this discussion is that there was a Washington Post article written once about the prevalence of people bringing in pictures of themselves with Snapchat filters and saying, can you make me look more like this when it came to plastic surgery? Actually, so much so that they started using this term body Snapchat dysmorphia, which is not an official DSM, you know, which is like we've got the Bible, and then below there's the DSM there. But for us psychotherapists, but body dysmorphic disorder is an officially recognized mental health disorder. But this whole idea of Snapchat dysmorphia seems to be so prevalent that it's kind of gotten its own lingo to it. So social media may be contributing to increasing anxiety and fear in the US. Anxiety disorders are the most common mental health disorders in the United States of America. It impacts 40+ million Americans. It's roughly 18% of the population yearly. And you know, anyone who's been in a school position, a counselor, administrator for a number of years has kind of had a firsthand experience to sort of the ticking up of the anxiety level in their population. I was talking to a friend of mine who's been a university department chair for quite a long time, and he said, you know, 15% of our student body are emotional support plans now, and that's just those who have sought support. We had to substantially increase our support staff over the past 10 years. And I don't think that's just a singular experience. I think that represents a general uptick in anxiety. And there's research that, again, captures that. And not just captures the uptick in anxiety, but looks at that as technology in social media use increases. In this image, I know it's hard to see, but the purple line refers to online activity from 2006 to 2017. And the things like the orange line is face-to-face interaction, the blue line is happiness, the green line is quality of sleep, and you can see sort of an inverse relationship as technology use has increased to some of these other things have decreased. So wait, what does anxiety have to do with social media again? Human beings are highly social and empathic. And I think that goes without saying. Most of us like know that sort of intuitively. You know, or these pictures sort of illustrate moments you may have had yourself, seeing children just start laughing because one is laughing and then the other one's laughing harder and then the other one laughs even harder and they're like, what is happening? What's going on? It's just empathy at play, right? They're caught in an empathy loop here. And, you know, this image here isn't scientific at all, but it's kind of cool and I like it because it kind of gets at this idea of exchange of something between our minds, and that's not so different than how interpersonal neurobiology works, meaning like the way that we literally affect each other just by our expressions, by the very fact that we have emotions in each other's presence. So what if this is what you see in the news constantly, images like this? And I try to update this slide every so often because the scary images in one year can be different than the scary images in another year. So what's your level of concern about the world today? What if I asked that question to you all? Would you say, I think we are better off now than we have been in the past? Or would you say, I think the world is pretty much the same as it was in the past, no better, no worse? Or would you say, I think the world is a much more dangerous place than it was in the past? Most people would say, see, it feels more dangerous out there, which is interesting. You may be living in one of the safest times and the safest places in all human history. Provocative idea, I know, just stick with me on this, okay? And that's not to say that things don't happen, because they do, and life is hard, and life mows you down occasionally. That's not the point I'm making here, but stick with me. Max Ross is an economist at Oxford University, and he says that the news has been dominated by an onslaught of depressing headlines. And to really understand how the world is changing, you have to look at the big picture of things. And there's a website here called My World in Data, or Our World in Data, that you can access that has a lot of this research. But let's just look at a few things that Max captures. This is life expectancy from 1770 to 2019. In early, mid-1800s, like around 1850, the life expectancy was like 35. You know, if you were 40, it was like, wow, bonus time. That's great. I'm doing well in life. But over the next 100 years, things really shift. People start to live longer, and there's reasons for that, right? We realize that, well, doctors should wash their hands before performing surgery. Huge thing for life expectancy. But medications, other things are happening technology-wise. This is child mortality rate, not just in the US, but globally from 1950 to 2001. And without going into too much of specifics, you'll see sort of a significant downward trend. This is percentage of years in which great powers fought one another from 1500 to 2015. And there's from 1500 to 2015, again, a significant downward trend. There's war out there, and we see a lot of it, right? It's current, and it's real, and it's devastating, it's brutal. World War I was brutal. You know, World War II was brutal, too. And then there's world conflicts that go out in history where whole peoples were wiped out. Again, the big picture here is that there is an effect of safety that is probably greater now where we live in this room than many other places in world and human history. This is the share of the world population living in absolute poverty from 1820 to 2015. Again, downward trend. So the world is in many ways less dangerous, but people are feeling more and more anxious about things, because I think most people, even myself, if I'm being honest, would say, well, the world feels more dangerous in a lot of ways. The studies have shown that people are much more likely to repost something that evokes anger or fear than anything else. The age of digital economy, your attention is very, very valuable. And how do you get that is the question. Businesses are monetarily incentivized to get your attention, like in a very real way. You ever heard clickbait? Yeah? It's the idea that on the internet, you know, content whose main purpose is to attract the attention, to encourage visitors to click on a link to a particular web page. Which means, like, maybe you've had this experience where it's like, there was a devastating something that happened, and you look at the headline, it's like, I need to check this out, this looks bad. Fear is what's being activated. You click, and you're reading, but then you kind of subtly notice you're being, like, sold Reeboks on the side, like shoes. It's very subtle, but it's there for a reason. You know, you're also being advertised to. There's a salesman at your side as you're reading this article. Interesting fact, I always throw this in here. I'm not really a conspiracy theorist, but I like this fact that John Watson, who was an early American Psychological Association president, you know, he left the APA and went into advertising. It's kind of funny. What was his primary research? Generating the association of a fear response to behavior in a lot of ways. He did this thing called the Little Albert experiment, which I won't get into. You would never be able to do that these days with institutional ethics boards, but he did some things to see how easily you could sort of make a repulsion towards one thing. So fear and anxiety are, I'd like to normalize these things. In fact, I feel like a lot of therapy for me, oftentimes with people, is saying, well, that's what you're feeling, that's what you're thinking, you passed the human test, or welcome to humanity, my friend. You know, fear is adaptive. You need fear. You need some level of anxiety. You know, actually, it's what keeps us doing our homework. It keeps us making sure we return to work, even though we're tired. You know, these are not emotional packages you want to throw out. In fact, there's case studies where people have like a impaired amygdala, like the fear center. It doesn't go well for those people. It's not like they're living in bliss. Actually, there's a lot of dysfunction that happens with a lack of fear. But a disorder, you know, generalized anxiety disorder, is not adaptive, meaning that that thing that was supposed to help us is sort of on the fritz. It's making our life harder. And the thing about generalized anxiety disorder, which of all the anxiety disorders for adults is the most commonly diagnosed, is that the anxiety is nebulous. What I mean is that if you're scared of something specific like the bear and you're getting away from that thing, that's very adaptive. That's very helpful. But if you're just anxious and scared and you're sitting at home and you're not sure why, that's a problem, right? Something's going on there. Separation anxiety is the most common disorder for children that is diagnosed. Although some research says it's not just for kids anymore, actually. And that's, you know, separation anxiety is kind of what it sounds like. And you might have experienced this at times with people you know or children. It's hard to leave what feels like your safe base. And a lot of times for kids, that can be your parents or the kind adult that's with you and raising you. And it's hard to go into school when you've just been watching on the news like war scenes for the last 6 hours or something. It was just in the background. They didn't notice that the kids were watching it. But, you know, that creates anxiety, and it creates a wish to remain where you feel comfortable. Roger Hart is an environmental psychologist, and he did this really interesting study. I always have to be like, make a caveat here, a little disclaimer. You know, you can't really look at one piece of research and say it represents something. They'd have to repeat that piece of research and have it represent the same thing to say there's something to this. So this is a singular piece of research, but I like it because it illustrates a certain something, and I think it's maybe holds up some truth to it. But in the 1970s, at Clark University, he followed and interviewed 86 children ages 4 to 12, tracking the way that they explored the world for 2 years. And this was like in a small town in Vermont, I think. And he would like go up to them and be like, so show me where you go. Show me the places you hang out. Like, what do you do? And they just go with him. So what he found was that children in town had remarkable freedom. Like by age 10, most of the kids had their run of the town. You know, their parents weren't particularly worried about the environment, dangers, abduction of things that could potentially be dangerous. In fact, he drew all these maps about the roaming range of the kids, like in the circles represented like a singular kid and where that kid lived and how much range that kid had, and there was like tremendous range. But what's interesting is 30 years later, he repeated this research. He didn't just repeat the research, but he repeated it in the same town, and he repeated it like with the same kids that now were adults. And they had their own kids in different ways. And what he found was that unaccompanied roaming range of nearly all children was limited to the borders of the home or close outside the home. And nearly all the children did not have a secret place anywhere, actually. And there were no spaces that the adults didn't know about. And interestingly, no significant change in the amount of crime or overall welfare of the inhabitants of the small Vermont town 1970 compared to 2010. Now that's pretty fascinating, right? Basically what that's saying is there wasn't necessarily anything more dangerous happening in 2010 than there was in 1970, but people had very much a more danger feel in terms of where they went. And so generally the roaming range was that they wouldn't leave their backyards at that point. Everyone's range was right in their backyards there. Now, there's some conversation to be had here about the amygdala. I know I mentioned it earlier, but I'm just gonna kind of zip along for time's sake. It's responsible for the fight or flight mode, and it does a few things to our thinking, our body, our behavior. Socially, it does something interesting. You know, issues of in-group, out-group become more important when your amygdala is activated, when you're in a fear state. Why is that? Well, circle the wagons, right? If things are getting scary, let's like make sure we're with our crew here. And that has an interesting effect on this thing that we call bias. You know, a particular tendency, trend, inclination, feeling, or opinion that is preconceived or unreasoned. And it's kind of a negative thing, right? You're thinking something negative about this other person or other group in a way. So where am I going with this? We're heading towards another major election, right? What do you think is going to happen in terms of our content, what's going to appear online all of a sudden? Yeah, you know, that means the political attack ads focused on generating fear, moral outrage, will start to saturate nearly every media platform. And I have a link on here that is about research that links this idea of political ads and what it does to our relationships with other people. We're not going to watch it right now. But questions to wonder about, and sometimes the question's better than the answer, but how do you expect this will influence life and body of your congregation? You can probably remember other election cycles. You know, what do you think what's going to happen between people in the church? How do you want to respond or not respond to the influence of mass multimedia during an election season in your faith community, right? That's kind of an interesting and important question. So there's a lot of research about social media and cyberbullying out there, and most of it suggests that, bullying has certainly always been around, but a lot of it happens online now. And there are reasons why it happens, and I like to name a few because nothing happens for no reason. That's a bias. I'm a psychotherapist. Some things probably do, but depersonalization, because that's the idea that because interactions on social media occur through a screen, our natural ability to empathize, remember that whole thing I did about empathy, is short-circuited, right? We're not having the same exchange of emotion if we're doing it behind a screen, and that actually makes it easier to slip past what would be a socially installed protective program, right? So we don't hurt each other. That empathy helps us. And anonymity allows people to act cruelty with others without being known, using screen names and avatars as masks. That's always been true in history, right? When something bad's happening, usually you find masks or you find some sort of anonymity. It's actually why mobs get dangerous, because the anonymity of the crowd actually causes people to act less ethically. There's time delays, and what I mean is, if you come up and you say, James, that talk really stunk, man. I've never heard such a bad speech in my life. Well, if I'm right here, you're gonna have to deal with me. I'm gonna be really? Well, that's kind of harsh, don't you think? I put a lot of work into this. And so you're less likely to say something out of pocket or something that's harsh if you're with me, if we're with each other. But if you're just dropping and leaving, it actually gets a little easier to do something that's mean. It can feel like a game. I can't tell you how many young people sort of come into my office. They were mandated to be there by their school or the court, and I say, what happened? Well, I thought we were playing around. I thought that's what was going on. They thought that, but something was happening on the other end. Someone got hurt in their words or what got said. And I feel real empathy for the person because they didn't have their empathy online. They couldn't really see what was happening at that point. There was sort of a thing that happened because of the technology in a different way. I got to 9:15, right? All right, I got 2 minutes. I'll use them. There's a sleep cycle that we all exist in, right? And it can be impacted by technology and social media. It looks something like this. I have trouble sleeping, so I use my phone to occupy myself while I'm awake. My brain is stimulated by what I see, all the scary, moral, outrageous stuff. I'm awake, fatigued from lack of sleep, and I realize I'm late. It's late, and I try to sleep. I have trouble sleeping, so I use my phone to kind of keep myself occupied. You see how that goes? That's a tough cycle to get stuck in. So what do you do about this, right? I've been to seminars where someone builds your anxiety with all the scary stuff, and they say, well, good luck, see you later. And then you're left going, oh, what? But let's not leave today without some tips, right? Portion control. Healthy social media use means portion control. Pick a time. Try not to go over 2 hours. We sometimes even our phones have this ability to measure how much time we use. That can be a really useful thing. It is breaking the negative sleep cycle. It makes a difference to put your phone at the other end of the room, so it's not so easily able to get at. You have to actually get out of bed, and that actually, surprise, we're just lazy enough where we might say, it's not worth it, and just go back to sleep. That's not such a bad thing. Parents of children using social media, be informed. What social media your child is using. Be aware who your children are talking to. Monitor your child, what they're doing on social media. Myth here, if I monitor my child's social media use, I'm not respecting their privacy. Well, it's a little tricky, right? Because a lot of places on social media are kind of like, the party that you don't know who's there, that they've just showed up to. And yes, there is a conversation here about trust. And if you got a lot of trust, then it feels like that equals a lot of freedom, and that's appropriate. But you know, if you've got like an 8-year-old and they're using a social media app for the first time, then there's probably a lot of monitoring that's important there, because you don't know what they're getting into, and by the way, neither do they. They don't know what they're getting into either as they go through this social media experience. In schools, you know, this is kind of an important thing that I often like to put out there, but collaborating with your child's school and being interested in what are their policies. Like if they're handing an iPad to your kid, like it's kind of an important question. Like, do you guys talk about using this iPad at all? Do you have any rules with this iPad? By the way, do you have like protections on this iPad, or is it just like full Google range here with things? And so you might think, well, all the answers to those questions are yes, but actually no sometimes. And so it's important to actually get involved on that level. And for the therapists in the crowd, and it sounded like earlier there was a few of them, you know, thorough assessment. If someone comes into the office and they're dealing with anxiety, they're dealing with depression, it's not just the typical family history and what are you doing to take care of yourself. A really important question is, how much time, honestly, do you think you spend online? Like, that is something that really should be part of the assessment. That really makes a difference in terms of, you know, it's kind of like the way we think about a situation dictates what we do in the situation. So if the media is like a really part of it, you gotta have to be on target with that. And I always throw this in. Important thing is not to blame millennials or post-millennials for the social media problems. You know, kind of unfair, right? Like, young people are growing up in a world of unprecedented access, and they have more access to information than ever before in all of human history, and the information has more access to them. And blaming a whole generation or generations for issues related to technology that was invented and spread by people not in their generation, it's not nice. Like, they're dealing with it. So empathy here for young people, and I'd extend that to all of us in a lot of ways. And be your own social media bouncer. And what I mean is, like, a lot of social media has the ability to trim your page, right? Unfollow. That's the subtle version on Facebook. If you don't want to like unfriend someone, it's like, no, I just don't want to see your feed. That's a good thing. Notice your own reaction to a post. I kind of bristle every time that James posts something. And, well, that little bristle cumulatively adds up and maybe turns into like an anxiety disorder someday. So unfollow when you notice the bristle. Like, make it a better experience for yourself. Oh yeah, this was part of another presentation. There's no Cindy here, but all right. Why don't we round out our presentation? How many of you see this as blue and black? Anyone see it as gold and white? A couple. Okay, there. Yeah. Well, this is maybe you remember this image, but it's usually commentary about perception, right? And as I'm talking about it, I'm like, why did I put this image in here? It's not obvious to me, but why don't we wind down on that point? It's been good talking with you all. See you in the Q&A afterwards. And also be mindful about your social media and technology use.
to come, singing holy, 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 worthy of the glory, to the one who was and is to come, singing holy, 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 worthy of the glory, to the one who was and is to come, singing holy, 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 worthy of the glory, to the one who was and is to come. Holy, a crushing debt I could not pay, my sin so vile I was racked by shame. The chasm was wide, yet he found me. He bought my freedom at Calvary, paid in full with his blood. It is finished, love has won. Every sin nailed to the cross once for all, he paid the cost. No more a slave to what I've done, forever free, new life's begun. It's not by works that I am saved, but by his power, his endless grace, paid in full with his blood. It is finished, love has won. Every sin nailed to the cross once for all, he paid the cost. He chose to die at my expense, so I'll choose to live only for him. He chose to die at my expense, so I'll choose to live only for him. Paid in full with his blood. It is finished, love has won. Every sin nailed to the cross once for all, he paid the cost. So when I shed my earthly flesh, my soul released, I'll be home at last. Hell lost its power and death lost its sting. Oh, and Christ is my victory, Christ is my king.
It is only running currently on YouTube. We are trying to get it on Facebook, on our Facebook page, but YouTube's pretty easy. So I know there's some folks watching us on there. Toby Whitmer and his wife Amy are going to be leading our next session, and they're going to start off with a video, and then they'll come up and walk into the conversation. They're going to lead us through and share their story. So, with no further ado, Danny, when you're ready to shoot the video, go for it.
Every year in our country, nearly 50,000 people commit suicide. That's one every 11 minutes. That's more than the actual combat soldiers, Americans who died in World War I, on par with the number of military that died in Vietnam. Suicide is the second leading cause of deaths among 10 to 14-year-olds. It's the third leading cause of death in ages 15 to 24, and the fourth leading cause of death in ages 35 to 44. This is an epidemic of astronomical proportion, and we need to do something about it. Early on, we realized that some of the work that was being done in the prevention of suicide was inadequate. But after we lost Abigail, it became very clear that how we were being trained did not speak to the issue in the person's heart. We are Toby and Amy Whitmer, and we are the founders of the Safe Helps Group, a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to the prevention of suicide and to educate concerning the journey that leads to suicide and to comfort suicide survivors. At Safe Helps Group, we would like to train parents, pastors, teachers, counselors, a method of addressing the heart of someone who is in jeopardy. One of our main teaching packets will be how to engage your loved one and to find out what these things are in them that are ripening into hopelessness, and to try to lead them to resolving some of these issues. We'll also have resources that speak specifically to the need and the jeopardy of someone in suicide. It'll be engagements at schools and colleges and churches and civic groups, and launched a counseling group, Guiding Light Biblical Counseling, for people that we meet, people who, as we travel, share with us. And there's going to be someone like on call, a certified counselor that will directly connect with those people. Then hope comes. Oh, this is not an impossible thing in my life. That's a main component of helping people to engage and helping their loved ones. If this great need resonates with you, please reach out. We would love to connect with you. We look forward to hearing from you soon. Good morning. I'm Toby, and this is Amy, my wife. And I don't know how many of you were in the last session with James, but if it doesn't work out in psychiatry, psychology, he could be like a stand-up comedian. I mean, he's great. He's very enjoyable, right? So we have been in pastoral ministry for 31 years, 21 in Newark, Delaware, Lighthouse Baptist Church, where I was the pioneering pastor. At the same time, I served 7 years as a corporate chaplain, and was trained in crisis suicide intervention, these kind of things, never knowing that would be any deal in my life and our lives. And also I serve with Delaware State Police as honorary commander and a board advisor to Newcastle County, and have been, the wellness program for the troopers has been opened up to us to engage in, and we're thankful for that. So, and this is my wonderful wife, Amy. Oh, there's not a mic up here. John took it. Bad, John. John and I have known each other forever. We were youth pastors back in the day, and I love him with all of my heart.
My name is Amy, and a little bit more about us. We have 5 children, ages forever 28, are Abby, and down to 14, 3 girls, 2 boys. I'm an art teacher. I teach middle school and high school art, and I teach a high school health class. at a school. Our youngest actually are to attend that school. I'm also a piano teacher. I teach after school and in the mornings before I go in to teach at the school. At Lighthouse, I'm also a co-teacher for a ladies class. I share that responsibility with 3 other ladies. I think that's it as far as introduction.
All right,
Hand it back
very
to
good. You keep it. I'm good. So there we are, going along in life. 31 years in ministry, a youth pastor, assistant pastor, and then senior pastor. And on that fateful day of June 28th that will ever live in infamy in our lives were crushed. All of our lives changed. I resigned in January, and you'll hear a little bit more about that, but just with the realization that there's no way that I can continue to do the very tedious, mundane of lead pastoring. Lead pastoring is very stressful. It's not so much the job, it's the interaction and relationships with people and administration, leading, especially with the burdens of the world now through people on you. It would just be, when you're in complicated grief, very hard to be able to shoulder that at the same time. So 8 months ago, our lives radically changed. We had this wonderful daughter, our oldest daughter, 28 years old, Abigail. You saw her picture in the video. Beautiful, gorgeous, wonderful, larger than life. She is and was our sunshine. She loved the Lord. She wasn't a druggie on the street. She was not someone who was wasting her life. She had been married during COVID, and which helped a lot with the attendance and paying for that bill. I'm so thankful for that. Except that I front-ended her the money, and I never got anything back. So anyhow, she was beautiful. Her and her husband, youth group directors, Redeemer Fellowship in Delaware, if you know that church. She was successful in her career. She was the employee health coordinator for Nemours Hospital. She worked remotely. She had an office at the hospital. She bore the burdens of everyone else. She was, if there is such a thing, which is, the word is out, but if there was such a thing as an empath, she was an empath. She accepted everyone's burden. She was everyone else's accountability partner. She loved everyone. She was witty. She was brilliant. She was a theologian in her own right. And she always struggled with anxiety and with depression for many, many years. And it's interesting, I think it's, for me, very interesting to know that those two things can go together. Success, loving, bearing burdens, and struggling yourself with anxiety. Some of it she gets organically from both sides of the family, very honestly. She was very open with her struggles. Some people say, oh, it must have shocked you. So I don't know which way it is. It either surprised us or shocked us, but not both. We talked even about, in hushed tones, about the possibility that someday we could get a phone call. Abigail was extremely transparent with us. We bore the burden with her, and I'm thankful for that because there's not as much guilt on the other end of that, having known her struggles, cried with her, counseled her, helped her, maybe elongated, the struggle. I don't know. In our aftermath, the Lord has been very gracious on top of the years of pastoral ministry and biblical counseling. We launched in 2018 a group specifically for girls and women in our community called Guiding Light Biblical Counseling with certified counselors, and we had no idea that there was a point in that for our own family, I guess. But in addition to that, the Lord was very gracious in that Abigail herself brought us great education after her death. She left journals, prayer journals, and videos and audio files, almost as if the Lord was prepping her for using her death even in a much greater way than her life. And it has been a blessing. But one of the things that we have learned, and really the way that we are, the peace, it's not all the peace, it is a peace, is realizing that often on top of genuine mental illness and all these things that have gone into the jeopardy of people, there is this element that we have been calling unresolved issues and demons within. And that is baggage or events or abuses or guilt or situations in a person's life that is running kind of on a shuffle playlist in the back of their mind, continually running, continually a catalyst for hopelessness and danger. We liken it into like a bunch of bananas. Like I used to say hand of bananas, but people thought I was saying Hannah Banana, which I don't know who that is, but I do know Hannah Montana, but I don't know Hannah Banana. And if you can imagine when you first get them you probably can't eat them, the hand of bananas from the grocery store because they're green. However, there's this time element that they are ripening. And they are continually ripening, and I guess there's a sweet spot, but what I'm kind of pointing to is there will be a time where those bananas will turn totally black. And unless you're one of those people that freeze black bananas and use them in banana bread later, those bananas become kind of worthless, kind of hopeless at that point. And that's kind of how we feel about unresolved issues and demons within, at least in our daughter Abigail. That we knew of these things. We talked openly of these things that either she would not or could not resolve on her own. At 17 years old, working at Chick-fil-A, she was raped by a coworker, an adult, 22-year-old, raping her in the back of my car. We didn't know these things for 5 years until she had graduated college and she came back and she took me to the very brown beaches of Delaware, and the water's brown, and told me, "Dad, there's something I need to tell you." That worked in her, a secret she kept the whole way through college, from us at least, and she could not engage in maybe something that would have helped a component of closure, perhaps of prosecution. We did not find out the name of the guy until the police handed me back her phone several weeks after she died by suicide. But now we know the guy, and we are considering what the step is. We've talked with the state police, and the Attorney General of Delaware has given thumbs up. It's very hard to prosecute that way after the victim has passed. But she could not resolve it herself. She would not. She was terrified. The first time I spoke about it, she busted into tears and ran into her house. She could not. She lived with the PTSD of the rape itself and always wondering whether she would run back into the guy and all that kind of stuff, And there was something, she would not rip the scab off. She couldn't imagine herself giving testimony, being in court, blah, blah, blah. There was another banana that was ripening, an issue. She had PCOS. Most of you women probably know what that is. Polycystic ovarian syndrome. It was very hard from her from teenage years to ever keep her weight down. She did not have periods. She struggled with the body changes of the PCOS. Her testosterone levels were huge. She was always pre-diabetic. Several months before she passed, she was hospitalized with soaring numbers and actually just labeled diabetic. And she worked very hard after she got out and actually kind of went down on that and undiagnosed, and she was so proud of that. Body issues, past guilt over past sin, that although she, even in her suicide video, declared the gospel, I believe that Christ died for my sins, even the sin I'm about to commit. There are other things that were too serious to discuss, but they're all ripening. She either can't or won't resolve the issues, though we're trying to help her. We're trying to encourage her towards directions, but they're inside of her like impossibilities. And yet the time rolls on, and they're ripening. until that day, that night before, on June 27th, that she sat in the living room talking about these dark things, dark things, and staring off in the distance, and she said, "Dad, they will never change." The external statement of hopelessness. She'd been getting darker. She was on antidepressants. She'd been seeing counselors for a long time. They had upped her to prescription marijuana, and I'm not going to talk out of my pay grade about all those things. She lived about 25 minutes away, but she asked us if she could come for a couple of days, and she just needed a break. That morning, she went to remote meetings, hospital meetings on the back porch, which this is extremely morbid humor. Some of you who know, you know, morbid humor is somehow healing in this time. But listen, guys, if you have a complete plan of taking your life in the afternoon, don't go to meetings in the morning. Just skip them, save the time. All day, hours of meetings. And she took her lunch break, 11:15, she came in. Amy had a colonoscopy that morning. She was in the family room on the recliner, recovering. I, being the good husband, watching over her, blah, blah, blah. I had Wednesday evening services to prepare for. I was preparing in the living room. She came in too. She said, "Dad, can I help you with anything?" She fixed something, a spreadsheet problem that I was having. She was sweeter than she ever was before. I should have known. And she walked across the hall. She walked upstairs. She to her bedroom, they owned a home 25 minutes away, but she came back down. She walked to Amy. She kissed her on the head, said, "I love you, Mom." Walked across the foyer to me in the living room, kissed me. "I love you, Dad. I'm going to go walk in nature." She often did it. She very often took walks in nature, except this time she never came back. She had brought ammunition with her, 2 calibers, both I conceal carry, both she knew my guns. She went upstairs and found my gun. Didn't know if the ammunition would be separated, so she brought her own. I had an errand to run at about 3 o'clock or before that. I returned to find our oldest son, Andrew, and our 18-year-old Ellie in the living room couch saying, "Hey, Dad, you know where Abby is? We know she's struggling right now. We're going to take her out for dinner, shopping." That's extremely strange. Andrew works late hours. Strange. So he said, "No, I don't know where she is. She's 28 years old. She has a life of her own." I never even thought about her not returning after. Never thought about that. She's a fully functioning adult. And so we sat around for a little bit, and Amy says, "Did you see her post?" I said, "What post?" So I walked to the recliner in the family room, and she shows the post of a beautiful creek. It wasn't the creek. It was the song attached that was the problem. It was Abby and I'm originally from West Virginia, and we, kind of humorous country music, kind of whatever. And she had posted the old song, "He Stopped Loving Her Today." Some of you know that song, some of you don't. It's about the funeral of a man who loved his wife who had left him earlier, but the point was the leaving. We thought, where's this creek? She had several that she liked, and then this weird thought. I'm sitting, waiting, talking, wondering, and this weird thought hits me, so I just quietly walk up the stairs. I walk to where I kept it, opened it up, and my pistol was gone. I called my son Andrew up. We searched the house just in case, whatever. Called Amy up, and then it began. So we were trying to figure out where this creek is. Where's this creek? And so there is up where they live, there is a beautiful park, a big, large park, lots of topography, which is not always the case in Delaware. It's always flat. But we remembered that my son and his new wife had just They were renting from Abigail and Matthew at their house in Ellesmere. And that Dan worked night shift, and Hannah had not started. She's an RN for Christiana Hospital. And we called. Number one, Gen Zers never answer the phone, okay? So, but number two, what's the chances that they're actually there, whatever. Daniel picks up the phone. Explained to him the situation. We had called her husband by this time. He worked for Colonial School District. I said, Dan, can you jump in your car? Can you and Hannah jump in your car and go to that park and see if her car is in the parking lot? Time passes, very little time, less than 10 minutes. Dad, her car's here. I said, Dan, you can look around. We're coming to you, but don't walk up on anything. Strange, Dan. By this time, our 26-year-old is already to his car. He's tearing out of our development. It's a long way. He's flying. We're getting our shoes on. We get everyone, and that's important, a gift of God. All eight of us. Her husband, our children, Dan's spouse, all of us rushing to the park. We're searching. Her husband takes the left route. We're going down the creek. We're yelling, Abigail. And the phone rings, and it's her husband. He's screaming, Dad. We all run to where he is. It's like a movie where you're running, but you're not moving. I fall in a ditch. We drag ourselves through thorns and whatever, straight route, long ways away. It was also a gift from God. She was the most peaceful I had seen her in years. God has been so gracious with everything. Our lives have been devastated. But God is good. And when He allowed us to scream and yell and cuss and grieve for a long time, He gently came with the idea of using the tragedy for good. I knew I could not go back to pastoring. And He brought people around us who were professionals in their own realm, including a videographer, excellent people doing excellent things, pro bono, who loved Abigail. Amy's going to come and she's going to tell you a little bit about the aftermath and our own healing and our own therapy and all that kind of stuff, and then I'll come back.
Toby mentioned a little bit about the grief, and of course it was shock for the first few days, week or so, and then we realized the grief, and the grief just feels like you're just laid out on the ground in pieces. You've heard the phrase, everything, your world shattered, and that's how I felt as far as the grief. And I think maybe about 2 months after, I was able to start picking up those little pieces and putting them back together, and they don't look anything like they looked before. It's a completely different life, really. But in the aftermath, we did find several things that helped us. The very first thing, and this was probably, I think, maybe 4 to 6 weeks after, we were able to connect with a survivor of suicide group, SOS, in our area. And the lady who kind of headed up this group, our little group, her son had died by suicide, I think 17 years before. So she was really able to help us, connect with us, and those first few meetings. And one thing that really helped us was we knew we would carry this grief the rest of our lives. We know we will be carrying this. But she told us that we could and we would eventually be able to, in our other hand, carry joy, find that joy, and carry them both together through life. And we have found that to be true. We've had many joyous times since then. Of course, we still carry the grief as well. Another thing that has helped us was we were able to connect with a therapist, with a group near where we live. And this therapist, she also lost a son to suicide. So in the beginning, starting in September, we were meeting weekly with her. Toby and I met separately weekly, and then together weekly, and then our 2 youngest daughters met weekly with her. So 5 sessions with her each week for a few months, and now we've gone down to once a month with still meeting with her, and that has really helped us as well with our healing, and knowing that what we're going through, our thoughts are normal for what we've been through. One other thing that we have learned that's helping us is, and our therapist did teach us this, that we need to do what's called grief homework, allowing ourselves each day to grieve, not putting it off, not pushing it off, not running from the grief, but embracing that, taking time every day. And Toby and I do this completely differently. Mine just hits me at usually before or after work, which is very convenient. So I'm able to take that time, just weep, and grieve Abby. And Toby also takes that time. And so I feel like every day for the last 8 months, we have cried, taken time to grieve and cried for our Abigail. Our kids also continue to heal. They, each one has dealt with it a little bit differently, but they are all handling it, and we do check in with them to make sure they're okay. And but we are healing and continuing through that process of grief.
So concerning our own therapist, her name is Monica Shire. She was a professor at the University of Delaware, and when she lost her son by suicide, and she had already had a master's in counseling, and she knew that she wanted to dedicate the rest of her life, so she joined a very large group called Resilient Kids and Family that is based on a horse farm, a big horse farm, and a large staff. She called us. It was kind of funny. A disgruntled member of our church who had left our church actually told her our story. And she called on like day 2 or 3. You know, we're just laid out, disabled. You know, we hunkered down. All of our family came kind of live for us. Our church was great in bringing us food and stuff. And she called, and it was like a 3-minute conversation. She said, "You don't know who I am. My name is Monica Shire. I'm a therapist. If and when you would like to talk to me, I lost my son by suicide. I'm here." And that was it. And so just probably by the end of that week, I had called her again, and you know, the Lord had provided. She is an incredible entrepreneur woman who also is becoming the education side for us as well. We're learning so much. So this Safe Helps group was like a phoenix rising from the ashes, and like I said, the Lord just brought so many people around us. So I have a friend who is a CFO for an attorney firm, a national firm, who called me and said, "I'm so sorry about what happened. Is there anything I can do for you?" And I said, "Actually, yes." I gave him this idea. We would like to go the nonprofit route. He said, "Don't think of anything else. I'm going to take care of it." So his attorneys and under him and the paralegals, they did everything for us. And it was wonderful. And it's been a blessing that the Lord has brought different pieces to all of this to help us. So we have been traveling and speaking and learning and researching and doing the best. I hope that we can connect with many of you professionals, and you can help us, you know, add to the discussion. We just did a a college, a leadership symposium. This past week, we're speaking at churches. Crazy part, the crazy thing, the representative, we build a building, a church, an auditorium, and you have to have a county representative to, like a government representative, to support you doing that, sponsor you, it's called. So that person was Bethany Hall Long, you know, when she was just on that local level, and then her career, you know, went upward, and she is now the lieutenant governor of Delaware and the heir apparent to being the governor this year. And she just connected with our family, and Abigail's loss. She's known us for 20 years and opened up doors for us. The state police opened up the wellness program for us also. And so I'm just we're going to do our very, very best. And if you could help us by saying, hey, you need to know this part of it, you need to know this part of it, or just, you know, we're kind of new at this. We obviously have had a lot of experience at interacting and ministering with people, and this terrible experience. We're going to do all that we possibly can do for the prevention of suicide, immediately connecting people with the right therapists, the right counselors that can help them. We've done a lot of triage already that the Lord has brought to us. The greater church has no words for this. They don't know what to say. It's taboo. Don't want to say something lest I make it worse. Don't know how to engage, whatever. This has been our lives. And to educate maybe in some verbiage and some understanding of engagement, at least with their nephews and nieces and children and grandchildren, something, you know, to engage and really to maybe draw out some of these greater unresolved issues and demons within, so that they can come to the point of pointing them to true help, I think is one of our main missions. So the education of the greater church and community about the road that leads to suicide. And we have such a heart to cry and to hug and to hold on to people like Bunny, wherever she is, and people like us who have lost loved ones by suicide. So think of us, pray for us. There's brochures here. There's self-addressed envelopes if you want to send us a note, letter, donation, whatever. But check out our website. It's pretty developed. And thank you for allowing us to be here, Pastor John. Love you, brother. Know so much bad about you I could share, but won't. Love you.
So our son had reached out to us one time, we actually to come. Singing holy, 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 worthy of the glory, to the one who was and is to come. Singing holy, 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 worthy of the glory, to the one who was and is to come. Singing holy, 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 worthy of the
Okay. I just wanted to remind everybody two things. First of all, a couple of you have asked, if you didn't hear, UPCC free is our internet connection, and it's John 3:16 in between 3 and 1. There's 3 sessions this time. We have Mark up here on boundaries. We're going to be, we also have a session in the overflow again that's going to be talking about lived experiences, children with, managing, what we can do. And then Dave's downstairs about how you can help minister to folks with their mental health struggles from his professional perspective through access. So those are our 3 options this time that you have. We do have the YouTube Live now streaming on Facebook Live as well, in case you shared that with friends. And all the sessions in the auditorium are being taped as well. So you'll be able to find those on UPCC Films on the YouTube, that's our YouTube channel, UPCC Films. So you're aware of that. And with no further ado, reluctantly I hand over the microphone because I'm leaving the room on top of this. So I apologize ahead of time. There's a disclaimer, the management. No, just kidding.
So stop me if you've heard the story about John. Just kidding. So if you were here when James was talking, he talked a little bit about social media, and at the end he said, maybe one of the things you could do to manage your social media use, portion control is important, and maybe one of the things you can do is put your phone away from you overnight. So he knows what I do, right? I didn't know that, but he realizes what I do at home. And so that's a little bit of a boundary setting, right? I'm setting a boundary with my device, with my phone. You're going to be over there. I'm going to be over here while I sleep. If you were in the last session with Lauren, she said, I wrote it down so I can get it right. Sometimes you have to say no to the good things so that you can say yes to the best things, right? It's also, she said it twice because it is important. So I'm repeating it just as a third way to make sure it gets in. Also a boundary thing. So the point that I'm trying to make is that boundaries exist around us all the time. And sometimes we pay attention to them, lots of times we don't. And so what we're going to talk about in this portion is sort of how do we understand the boundaries in our life, and how do we manage them, pay attention to them, tend to them in a way that is helpful to us. I also mentioned when we were just talking at the very beginning about the pandemic. So, we'll get to the next slide in a minute. The pandemic, my friend Jess was just here. She, a colleague from Access, and she likes to say about the pandemic, we all got thrown into the deep end all at once. Like we had no idea what was going to happen, and all of a sudden this thing happened. None of us collectively knew what to do. And one of the things that happened was the pandemic really changed, it upended our sense of boundaries, right? The boundaries that we sort of knew about, we relied on, we didn't really pay much attention to, suddenly got changed. So I want you to think for a minute, what's a boundary thing that was changed in your life by the pandemic? And you'll shout them out. I'll repeat it for the live stream audience. But what's a boundary thing that changed in your life because of the pandemic? What ideas? Go ahead. We had a sense to be what it's like to be home and have a margin that we didn't have before. Yeah. Work-life balance. Dave Eckert and I have done versions of this training for a while that we started during the pandemic, and a person in the audience, in a Zoom audience, said, in year 1, I worked from home. In year 2, I live at work. He was in the same room. But year 2, we all felt tired. And that's how he started to reorient his boundary-challenged life at that point. So our work-life balance was changed. What else? Yes, yes, so both ways. People are living together, so we're sort of orbiting, our families are orbiting each other in the house, but how do we come together? Because we're together all the time in that sense. The other thing is some of us learned that the reason our family got along so well is because we didn't spend so much time together. Right? And there was a large battle in my family about Wi-Fi usage and bandwidth, and whose meeting was more important. That meant that they got to sit closer to the router, right? Parents were also finding out they were teachers. The parents who said, I'm so grateful for the teacher that I didn't realize I was grateful for now because my kid is now at home trying to learn. So we have a sense, we know that. We know that the pandemic really upended sort of our sense of boundaries. And so part the way through, or about a year in, we decided at Access, where we worked, to start having some conversations with our staff about a couple of things, and they're all interrelated. So when Lauren was talking, she was talking about self-care or wellness. And so how do boundaries connect to wellness? So we had a sort of a 3-part thing that we were talking to everybody about, was how do you have wellness, and how is that a rigorous discipline in your life? Secondly, what do you do when really hard things land on you? Sort of like, so we think of trauma or traumatic experience, but really, what do you do when hard things land on you? And then the third thing is, what's your boundary life look like? And how do you manage those things? And recognizing that all 3 of those things were working together in our lives. And so we started to do this conversation as just as sort of to help our staff just be well and be able to do their job. And then we realized that it was pretty universal. And that so people outside of our agency were saying, could you come and talk to us about or help our staff, or come to churches? So we did a lot of church stuff as well. I've done a couple of these conversations with teachers who were now doing hybrid classes or doing Zoom classes. And one of the things that landed on them was they said, we have students all the time that we know are struggling at home, and we know that their home life is really hard. We knew this all along, but now we're seeing their living room. We're seeing other people interact behind them. We're seeing a part of their life that we never saw before, and it's really hard for us as teachers to watch that. So my point is that we've had this conversation that's been growing for a while. We recognize the boundaries have been with us forever. Wellness issues have been with us forever. How we manage hard things has been with us forever. But the pandemic is not only a hardship, but an opportunity for us to say, wow, we have a collective experience that we can draw from. And so what I want to do today, this is also sort of a flyover. This is a short period of time that we have this conversation. So I want to talk to us about how boundaries help us be well, how boundaries are relational. And so what do we do in relational boundaries? So it's not going to be all the aspects of boundaries that you want to know about, but we're going to focus on the relational aspect of boundaries. And then we're going to talk about a boundary profile, because you have one. As we sit and talk right now, you have a boundary profile. You may not be aware of it. But we want to leave here being more aware of you have a boundary profile, and you want to make sure that you know about it and you're setting it up in ways that make sense for you. So give me the next slide, maybe. So just back up 1 second, because we covered this. So some of that personal, we'll come to the personal boundary profile in a little bit, but some of those boundary themes that we've experienced, we talked through in terms of what the pandemic did to us. So go ahead to the next one. So you have a boundary profile, even if you don't know it. Boundaries are mostly relational, or they have a relational aspect to it. So when we talk to staff, for example, sometimes people will say, well, the memo said, we're effective immediately. There's lots of spaces in our life where we're boundaried by memo or by policy. And so we sort of hang our hat on that. But we don't have an opportunity to really talk through with people about what's that boundary about. And so we're going to focus today on how do we understand the relational aspect of boundaries. And we're not taught a lot to navigate those boundaries relationally. And when we struggle to understand or negotiate those boundaries, it impacts us a lot. So one of the things I've learned to do when I'm helping somebody, particularly when I'm working with somebody, where I'm trying to help somebody, and I find out that I'm frustrated with them, or I'm pissed off at them a little bit, I stop and say, is there a boundary issue in this space that I wasn't paying attention to? It turns out I had an expectation on them. It turns out they had an expectation on me that if they asked me, I would be able to fix whatever their issue was, and I can't. And so we have a gap in terms of what the expectation about each other is. And in that gap, we're frustrated with each other. It helps me to notice when I'm upset, to stop, to pause, and say, I wonder if there's a boundary issue in the room, and what might that be? So those are the big ideas. Go to the next slide. We might change it up a little bit. Pull up the video. So we're going to watch Brene Brown. It's a short video. It's an interview around empathy and boundaries. I don't know, has anybody seen or do they know of Brene Brown, right? So some of us do. She just says things really well, and simply for me. For a guy like me, I like it kind of simple and straightforward. So we're going to listen to her talk about boundaries. And so what I want you to listen for is, what is her definition? She offers a definition of boundaries. And then just any other sort of, what lands on you, what strikes you when she talks. So go ahead.
One of the most shocking findings of my work was the idea that the most compassionate people I have interviewed over the last 13 years were also the absolutely most boundaried. Because so I'll give you a great definition of the definition of boundary that I use in the book. Boundary is simply what's okay and what's not okay. What I think we do is we don't set boundaries. We let people do things that are not okay, or get away with behaviors that are not okay. Then we're just resentful and hateful. Me, I'd rather be loving and generous and very straightforward with what's okay and what's not okay. And I did not, that I learned from the research. I was the exact opposite. I assumed for the first 35 years of my life that people were sucking on purpose just to piss me off. That's what I assumed. Yeah, right. Whether it was someone who worked for me, or it was someone family member who was constantly like, I was always critical and judgy. And I was like, why are they choosing these things? Why are they making their choices? They should know better. And then when this thing came up from my therapist, what if people are doing the best they can? I thought, my husband had the most beautiful answer to that question. He said, I'll never know whether people are doing the best they can or not. But when I assume people are, it makes my life better. So now I think I am not as sweet as I used to be, but I'm far more loving.
It's not just some technique so that you can do that. That's really
a way of being to like nurture that soil of wholeheartedness.
Yeah. Generosity, to assume the best about people, is almost an inherently selfish act, because the life you change first is your own.
You love yourself.
Yeah. And so my question is big, B-I-G. What boundaries need to be in place for me to stay in my integrity and make the most generous assumptions about you? But generosity can't exist without boundaries, and we are not comfortable setting boundaries because we care more about what people will think, and we don't want to disappoint anyone. We want everyone to like us, and boundaries are not easy. But I think they're the key to self-love, and I think they're the key to treating others with loving kindness. Sustaining. You can't, nothing is sustainable without boundaries. I think compassion and empathy are different things, and again, I'm relying on my data for this. I think compassion is a deeply held belief that we're inextricably connected to each other by something rooted in love and goodness. I call that God. Not everybody calls that God. My dad would call it fishing. Fishing?
Is it fishing?
No, there's no G in fishing. But I think compassion is a deeply held belief. I think empathy is the skill set to bring compassion alive. So empathy is something we can teach. I mean, it's something we've taught our kids since they were very little. It's about how to communicate that deep love for people in a way so that people don't know they're not alone. I think there's a lot of new interesting information out there about empathy not being a good thing, about that, there's an argument that says, if Travis is in struggle and I practice empathy with you, I'm taking on your darkness, and it leads to burnout, and it leads to, but empathy is not feeling for somebody. It's feeling with them. It's touching a place in me that knows where you've been, so I can look at you and say, me too, brother. You're not alone in this. And I find empathy to be infinite. I think it gives back tenfold what you put out.
It's sustaining. Like if you've done the work and you have your boundaries, I mean, you could tread that water forever and never get tired.
Okay, so empathy. I'm quoting Travis here, empathy. If you've done your work and set your boundaries, you can tread that water forever. Yeah. Amen. It's not finite. And it keeps giving back to us. And so this idea that, but here we go back to where we started this conversation. Empathy minus boundaries is not empathy. Compassion minus boundaries is not genuine. Vulnerability without boundaries is not vulnerability. So you see that there's a huge riff here, which is boundaries are freaking important.
Right.
And they're not fake walls. They're not separation. Boundaries are not division. They're respect. Here's what's okay for me and here's what's not.
So, what jumped out at you? What's memorable, or what struck you? Having boundaries helps you avoid burnout. Yep. What else? Go ahead. Remembering your integrity. The big. What boundaries do I need to set so that I can maintain my integrity and think generously about you? That's her, and her definition is what's okay and what's not okay. It seems too simple, right? I will tell you that one of my life hacks, one of the things, I ask 2 questions, if not every day, almost every day. The first is this one: what part of this is okay and what part of this is not okay? Because usually what happens, the way the process works for me, is I find myself upset with somebody. And I've told you that one of the things I've learned to do is I've paused, is to pause and say, is there a boundary issue here? Are they doing something I wish they weren't going to do? Are they expecting something from me that I don't think I should have to give or I don't have to give? So saying in that moment, when I hit that pause, to say, what part of this is okay and what's not okay is super helpful, because usually I lead with resentment, or I lead with some sort of bad feeling in myself, and then I say, oh, that happened, that there's something here I have to right the ship around. I wonder what that is. So asking that question is helpful for me, and usually my instinct at that moment, because I've not noticed it till now, my instinct is the one to throw the whole thing out. Fine, I'm done. I can't help you, I can't work with you, I can't, like, you, I'm just gonna walk away because I haven't figured out that there is a boundary thing, and it's not all bad, there's just a portion of it. There's a piece of it that's not okay. So I actually say those things even if it's under my breath. What part of this is okay, Mark, and what part of this is not okay? When I start to suss that out, right, then I realize I then need to communicate that. Right? And so how do I help this person? How do I have this conversation with them to say, this part is okay? I'm cool with that. There's this other part that I'm less okay with, and we just need to discuss that, right? So the other hack is, what part of this am I in control of, and which part of this am I not in control of? Because that's the other thing that sort of upends me, is when there's something, I get most anxious, I get most worried, I get most bothered by things that I tend not to be very much in control of. But within that, there is something that I can do. There's something that I am in control of. There's a response that I can have that is mine to have. And so those two sort of basic life hacks have been super functionally helpful to me when I think through this. Oh, can you go back a couple slides to that one right there. So if you remember the first slide, it was Gandalf, and you shall not pass. Right? So it's this idea that that boundary is a line. And why do we have to set the line? Because we think somebody's going to come across too far. So we have to stop somebody's action. Right? And so there's this basic sense of boundaries where we have to set these limits with other people. And the horde is trying to come over them. They're trying to come across the line, and we have to set that line. And I like this. And this is a slide that we use for staff who are doing a service. And their service, they want their service to be helpful. But this applies for all of us. Boundaries, help is relational. Who you are matters, who they are matters. And regardless of what your role is with that person, what you're trying to be is helpful to another human being. It's relational, which means that space that you see, the long oblong circle there in between the two people, that's where the relationship exists, okay? And so, instead of saying, Gandalf would put a line, a vertical line in between the two of those and say, you can't come across here. But it's helpful to me when we say boundary setting is really about relational management, is to say what part of this fits inside that oblong circle? What belongs in this relationship? And what are the things that belong outside of the relationship? Right? So if you think of the different relationships that you have somebody that can call you and say, hey, I'm having this issue, can I run something by you? The chances are that person is not the person who can call you at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, I'm having a family emergency, can you come over, right? So it's not a line that you're creating and saying you can't come across here. You're saying in our relationship, here are the things that fit inside of it. And there's also things that fit outside that relationship. And sometimes one of the things that happens for me in my work is that people don't have a lot of relationships. So because I've helped them with one thing, they don't know who else to turn to. So so the fact that they're calling me at 2 o'clock in the morning is a problem for me, because I put my phone across it's in the living room and I have to get out of bed and go get it, right? But But what they're doing is they're saying, I need help, and you were helpful in this other area. I'm hoping that you can be helpful here, right? What part of this is okay? What part of this is not okay? I'm glad you reached out. 2 o'clock in the morning just isn't okay with me. That's the part that's not okay. But I want you to see me as a person who can help you. So that's a clarification that I have to do with that person. So it's just helpful for me to be able to notice that the problem isn't that the person's coming across the line. It's that our relationship, the way it is not designed to handle the thing that's come up now between us, and that requires a clarification. There's a guy who is, I do a lot of work with folks who are experiencing homelessness, and I volunteer at Beacon of Hope, which is a shelter in Pottstown. And there's a guy that I know, I've known him for a couple of years, his name is Robert. Robert has some sort of, he's lived outside, and he has some sort of intellectual disability. I haven't quite figured that out, but every time Robert sees me, he says, do you have $2? Can you give me $2? I've known Robert for 2 years, I've never given him $2. But every time he sees me, he says that. So I could say, Robert, at what point are you going to stop asking me? Or stop asking me? Or what do you think the answer is, Robert? I just remind him. No, I'm not going to no, I don't have $2. Because my relationship, though, there are people I give money to. But Robert's not one of them. So I was actually, in fact, he said to me, he goes, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So here's a man trying to survive, and he needs some money. So at one point, and this is the communication, what part of this is okay and what part of it's not okay. It's okay for him to ask. It's okay for him to ask repeatedly. What wouldn't be okay is if he had an expectation that I had to give him money, right? So I have had this conversation from time to time, just to I say, Robert, let's remind me. In the time I've known you, have I ever given you money? And he's like, no. And so I say, well, do you think it's because of you? Do you think it's because I'm not going to give you money that I give other people money? And he said, I don't know. So I said, well, I don't. I just don't carry money. And it's sort of how it's a part of my boundary profile. We're going to get to in a minute. We're going to say, what's your boundary profile? One of the things that I do to be helpful with folks living outside is I carry a lot of things. I give people a lot of things. I don't carry cash. Because if I did, then I would have to figure out who am I going to give it to and who am I not going to give it to. And so what I've decided is that for me, in the way that I'm trying to be helpful to lots of people, is to just not carry cash on me. So then that's a simple thing to say. I have a Pop-Tart. People have learned that I'm good for a Pop-Tart, and sometimes a Pop-Tart is really the best thing in somebody's day. So I will hand you a Pop-Tart, and I have multiple. I have different kinds. You don't like brown sugar? I have frosted strawberry. That's okay. So I will give you a Pop-Tart every day of the week, and I stock up on that, but I don't give out cash. So me reminding Robert that it's not him, and it's just that I'm not a money guy. In our relationship, in that circle, I'm good for Pop-Tarts and socks and a ride, but I'm just not so good with money. And so it's not, I'm not taking it personally, and I'm not upset with him. And we've had the conversation to make sure he's clear that I'm not a bad guy, and it's not that I don't like him. It's just that this is something that he can expect inside of our relationship, and he can also expect that some things he might ask me fall outside of that. Does that make sense? Okay, let's look at our time. Anything else? Let's go back to Brene. Anything else that you noticed in what she said that struck you? Go ahead, Julie. Yeah, right. So there's a little bit of boundary setting that just makes us better humans. And she actually said it's kind of a selfish thing. One of the ways we take care of it, so which leads us back to wellness. One of the things that ways that we take good care of ourselves is saying, I know where I start and stop. And I've done due diligence on that so that I am okay saying, I can't do this thing. I'm saying no to a good thing so that I can say yes to something better. When I'm clear on all that, then I'm actually, it's a selfish act. I'm not only taking care of you and us, I'm taking care of myself as well. What else? Anything else? I'm going to point out one last thing, and it sort of goes with what we said in the slide. Travis, who was the one interviewing her, said, if you do your homework or your work and you set good boundaries, you can stay in the space of empathy forever. You can tread that water all day. And she says yes. And so if you think about being in that middle circle, if you set boundaries well, you're taking care of yourself. You're also managing the relationship really well. And you can stay in that space and be very helpful with a person for a really long time. And she said it's self-sustaining. It goes on because it gives you something out of that. And I'm hoping that you're understanding this as sort of a different way to orient ourselves to boundaries, which oftentimes is a negative thing, which is saying, I have to stop you from doing this thing because if I don't, bad things will happen to me. and this is a shift. This is, I really want to be in this relationship with you, whatever that is. We could be a neighbor, we could be a friend, we could be an acquaintance. Whatever that relationship is, I can stay in that relationship really well because I've just realized what goes in that relationship, the things that don't go in that relationship, and we've had that conversation about that. Okay, so go to, I've lost track of where we are in slides, but that's my bad. Go to, back up to the one that says boundary, it's the slide that has two sides. There's the, keep going back, one more. Oh, well, there we go. Okay, so the right-hand side, I'm going to give us a couple of minutes to think about our own boundary profile. And so I'm hoping that you'll jot some things down, so you're having some moments of reflection. But can anybody give me an example of something that they know about themselves, that this is a boundary for me, and when people push on it, I turn out to be a less happy human being. I'm not my best self when somebody pushes on my boundary. Go ahead. Okay, when people tell us what I should do, it's not a suggestion, but I'm telling you what you should do or what my expectation is of you. I see other people nodding. Yes, right. Yes, okay, right. And so there are ways that we can make suggestions that don't come across like that, that say, I will agree to do that. I just didn't want to be told that I have to do it. Go ahead. When people are late, okay. There was a woman that I worked with years ago, and it has taken me, I showed up here super early today because I finally learned in my life that when you're early, you're not late, right? It took me a long time to sort that, but I always worked on sort of, we called it Eastern Standard Mark Time, which just all the numbers ended in ish. I would show up ish, right? And I worked with a woman who had that. It was a person that we were serving, and she was very passive. She didn't say what was on her mind a lot of time, but we were driving someplace and I could tell she was super mad. And I said, what's going on? And she hemmed and hawed and finally said, you've been late 3 times in a row. Not a lot, but you've been late. And it's important for you to be punctual. So I had to change my schedule to add a half hour to my day before I went to see her so that I would show up on time. And if I was running late, I had to tell her. Right? This is my ETA. Yep. Yes, right. 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 So there you see, I didn't pay her. This is a perfect example. This is a perfect example of staying. So you could just be mad at me, right? And not say anything, but just be mad. But you said, what's okay and what's not okay. Mark, I get that the world sometimes runs late. I get that you're an ish person, but don't disrespect my time. That's what's important to me. So the part of this is not okay is for you to show up late all the time or regularly and not give me a reason. Or not have me wondering when you're going to show up. Should I do something else and wait for you? Should I use my time wisely some other way? So that's a really good example of breaking it down by what part of this is okay and what's not. Go ahead. Mm. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So I'm going to repeat that, or try to. That was a really good. That was really good. That part of the important issue is how do we communicate when we realize that there's a boundary issue. And to your point, sometimes we don't notice it right away. Like we start to feel some kind of way, and then it builds up slowly, and it's sort of like that frog in boiling water. Like it goes up a little bit at a time. We don't quite notice it. Then we say, oh, we do. And then our first reaction is to say, that's it, I'm done. When really we say, okay, I've noticed that there's a boundary issue, and you also said what part of this is okay and not okay. It's okay for you to ask for more. What's not okay is when you feel entitled to it, right? So then how do you communicate that to somebody else? One of the things that's been helpful to me is when we know, so you just described a really good reflective process that you went through. I noticed this thing, I thought about it, and now I have to communicate it to somebody else. One of the things that's been helpful for me to bring up that conversation, besides cut that out, which tends not to go over real well, right? So, but that's what I'm feeling, right? So sometimes when I speak out of that, it doesn't go so well. But what goes better is when I say, I've noticed this thing. And maybe I should have noticed it before, and maybe I should have said something before, but I didn't realize it. But now I'm realizing, and I just need to share that with you. And so then I'm really glad that I'm able to help you. I'm really glad that you've come to me for help. Or it's been great for me to be able to offer this to you, and I'm grateful for that experience. And you're important to me. There's this other part of it that I'm struggling with. And so if you think, we changed the slide, but if you think about that circle, what you're saying is, I've noticed that this belongs inside our circle, and this is okay. And there's this other part that doesn't belong inside of our circle, and I'm noticing that, and I'm inviting you to notice it with me. Go ahead. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. So she was talking about givers, takers, and matchers. And sometimes we bump into people who just take, right? And we usually, at some point in terms of our boundary conversation, we say they don't have boundaries, right? Or they don't have good boundaries. Or so we sort of interpret it that way. My friend who said, a closed mouth doesn't get fed, is not really thinking relationally. He's just thinking in a survival sense. I'm hungry and I need to meet my needs, and I'm going to get. And what I've also realized is if I say no to him or other people who ask, they're just asking because this is a need that they have. And so they're asking to see if I can meet it. And if I can't meet it, they're on to the next person to see if they can meet my need as well. You're also talking about just the importance of noticing that the issue is, it's not that you want something and I'm going to try to give it to you, it's just that I can't give you everything. And so having a conversation about this is what I can do and this is what I can't do is just helpful. And sometimes when we talk about it, at Access, in some of our staff programs, we've developed this thing called compass points, which is we all want a map, which says, just show me how to go and where my destination is and how to get there. And most of human nature and navigating relationships does not have a map. It doesn't have a rule book to go with it. It doesn't have a map for it. But there are compass points which help us sort of keep oriented to the north. And so one of the things that we have used with staff as a compass point for this is to say, when you're setting a limit, or setting, which is a kind of a boundary, right? A person's asking you for something you can't offer. It is to set a limit by offering something. Here's what I can do. Because you're also inferring there's 17 things I can't do. We don't have to get, maybe we get into that, but we don't have to necessarily. But here's what I can do. I'm glad to help you in this way. And if a person asks for more things, to say, well, this is what I can do. And I'm happy to do this, just sort of repeat that. Sometimes we do need to say that that's not a thing I can do, but I am willing to do this part. So sometimes you have to say both sides of it. But focusing on the things that you are able to do for somebody is a helpful way to start the conversation anyway with folks who seem to take a lot or want or need a lot. It's also helpful for me to just notice that there's people just trying to, so if we go back to that generous, if I tell you right now, I can do this thing, there's 7 things I can't do, but I'm letting you know that, then I can still stay in my integrity. That's the I part. This is what I have to offer. And I can still think generously about you. If I don't do that, then at some point I'm going to think less generously about you. Because and you used the word vampire. Like I'm going to feel about you as like a person that's just trying to suck me dry. Right? Go ahead. See James afterwards. What I would say is, first of all, as a parent, you have to set certain boundaries. My children are now in their 30s. My younger daughter is having a birthday today. So it's a little bit of a different thing. Although there's still requests to use my car. And it's now a brand new truck, which is now the flagship of my fleet, right? So I'm not sure that I'm going to, so in all of our relationships, our parental relationships, there are boundaries. So there's some of those things you just have to set a boundary and say, I'm the parent, I'm the adult here, and I have to set this. For me, understanding that a parent and child relationship is a relationship. It's a very specific kind of a relationship. It's very different from some of the other relationships. But yeah, right. Yes, right. So I said that we were just bringing up the car thing. For those people who have younger kids, I think the only reason so when they're 14 or 15, we spend an increasing amount of time just driving them everywhere, which I think sets the stage for us giving them the keys because we're so tired. Because otherwise, why would you give a 16-year-old the keys to a car? Like, I don't know why my parents did that for me. I know myself at 17. I should not have been behind, like what kind of crazy, like does that? One of the things I would say related to this conversation is really the idea of saying to a 19-year-old, this is the part that's okay, and this is the part that is not okay with me. And some of that is you have to make a decision around the things that you're not okay with. I've had the conversation around alcohol use with my kids, right? And substances. This is a substance-free zone. My hope for you would be that you would make really good decisions around this when I'm not with you. But this is so that's kind of not okay, but I don't have control over that. But this is the part that I really am not okay with. And so I'm making a decision around that because that is a part. This decision is something that I can and need to have control over. So that does not make anything easier. It's just sort of, that's a compass point for me to be able to say to somebody, this is the part that I'm okay with, this is where I'm kind of nervous, and this is where I'm really not okay, and this is the decision I have to make because I'm not okay with it. Does that make sense? Not easy, but yeah. Go ahead. Yes, right. So the people, I'm going to just repeat it so for people who may not have heard it. The managing of other people who bring their emotions to you and sort of expect that somehow you're going to make it better, that you're going to manage those, regulate those emotions and help them come away from that feeling better or feeling better regulated or managed. And when you were talking, I'm a grandfather of a toddler. She's 3.5. You know, as Pops, I see her every single day, which is the coolest thing ever. But, and she knows she can get me. I'm like, where did you learn to bat your eyes like that? Like, but she gets me to do things. But sometimes she just has super big, she's melting down. And she's upset or she says she's scared. She expects me to do something about it. And so even at that age, I'm sort of resonating with that. Like, I can't, like, wow, you're just going to have to cry for a little bit because I don't have any way of making, you know, even though I would like in my grandfatherhood to make that better. And I also know that probably I shouldn't, right? But I would still be willing to step in that space probably a little bit. But really, you're going to need to learn to manage and regulate yourself. So I was sort of connecting with that. One of the boundary things that I've had to learn in my own life is just to be really clear where I start and where I stop. So this is a thing, and those two sayings, like what am I in control of and what am I not in control of? I can't be in control of your emotions. I can't be in control of how you are expressing them or what you're feeling. I can give you a space, right, which is what you do, right, in counseling. You give somebody a space to work through something, but you can't take on that more than that. So just and so there's not an easy trick for that, except to say that one of my self-management goals is to be clear with myself and to grow in that way, to say I know where I start and I stop. And just maybe a quick personal thing about that. My wife has had some health issues across the course of our marriage, and so I've realized in our time, she's had a bunch of surgeries, and one of the loneliest moments in a marriage, which is a very intimate relationship, is when I've left her at the hospital and I've had to go home. Her job is to stay in the hospital and get ready for surgery the next day. My job is to leave and to go home and take care of the kids and do the other things all the things that go into our life together that are not surgery related. Right? So I think that has helped me say, even in things that seem real relational and even sometimes real intimate, there's a place where I start and I stop in relationship to the other people that are in my life. We're almost out of time, so I want us to take me back to the slide that has the boundary inventory right there, so a boundary profile. So I want you, we've given some examples, but I want you to, as a takeaway, to say, I need to think through, whether I do that on my phone or just in my head or I write it down, but what is my boundary profile? During COVID, I realized that my commute from place to place is where I prepared mentally for the next thing. And so in lieu of that, I was doing back-to-back-to-back-to-back Zoom meetings, which was not a good time management issue, but it also didn't help me prepare. So by year 2, I had learned to commute. I would walk around the block. I would get in my car and drive around the block and come home. But I would use that time to prepare. So I realized that was a boundary, part of my boundary profiles, I need moments between things. And I need them to myself. So that was the other thing. I'm living in a household, we're fighting for Wi-Fi priority, and I didn't have a space to turn the radio on real loud and listen to music. That's what I did in my car. So I started to commute back from my house back to my house with the radio on, right? So that's what happened when I understood that my boundary profile was a certain way. I didn't know that until the pandemic. I mean, I kind of knew it, but I didn't realize how important it was until the pandemic. Take me to the last slide. So so just some takeaways. Know your boundary profile. Know what happens to you when they're pressed on. Anticipate that. And know what your response usually is. We all need a wingman. We all need somebody who, and it has to be somebody that we accept. They can say, I need somebody in my life that says, Mark, you are full of hot, gassy air. You know, you just need, and I have to be able to receive that, right? So we need a wingman who gets to speak into our life a little bit. And it's a person who can give us reflection, but it's also a person that we can go and vent to a little bit when we're struggling, and give us a little bit of, in some of the self-help groups, that somebody will go and they'll talk, they'll share something pretty big, and the answer is keep coming back, right? So it's sort of like a lather, rinse, repeat kind of a process. So we're out of time. But I'm happy to talk also in the break of other issues related to boundaries. So thank you.
Be still and know the Lord our God is with us. He will never leave us. He will not crushing debt I could not pay. My sin so vile I was racked by shame. The chasm was wide, yet he found me. He bought my freedom at Calvary, paid in full with his blood. It is finished, love has won. Every sin nailed to the cross once for all. He paid the cost. No more a slave to what I've done. Forever free, new life's begun. It's not by works that I am saved, but by his power, his endless grace. Paid in full with his blood. It is finished, love has won. Every sin nailed to the cross once for all. He paid the cost. He chose to die at my expense. So I'll choose to live only for him. He chose to die at my expense. So I'll choose to live only for him. Paid in full with his blood. It is finished, love has won. Every sin nailed to the cross once for all. He paid the cost. So when I shed my earthly flesh, my soul released, I'll be home at last. Hell lost its power and death lost its sting. Oh, and Christ is my victory, Christ is my King. Yeah. Paid in full with his blood. It is finished, love has won. Every sin nailed to the cross once for all. He paid
So as our panel speakers are getting situated up front, I just want to go over a couple of items of business. So I love that you're all talking, but if you could just give me a couple minutes, that would be wonderful. So I feel like I do this at church a lot too. Okay, I'm glad you're talking, but we have to start. So I want to be done by noon, so I need to be mindful of that. So just a couple things. First of all, on your way out, feel free to take snacks for the road. Those are for you all to enjoy, so please do that on your way out as you leave. In your packet, your folder, there is a survey. I would love to have you fill that out because that helps us know. I can make whatever I think is the greatest summit in the world, and you guys all think it's horrible. So please fill that out and give us the information because our goal is to continue these back up again. And so your feedback helps us. And so this isn't like some where you fill out a survey and you're like, I'm not sure while I'm doing this for Comcast because I'm pretty sure they don't care anyways what I say. Not that I'm bitter at Comcast or anything, but sorry if you work for Comcast. We can talk later if you want. But if you would fill that out, we will listen and we will make adjustments. Some of the sessions we have this time were because of what was last time. Like some of the most popular ones we brought back, we added some new ones, and that was because the folks who were the last one, what they indicated. Topics we might not be discussing, we're gonna hear from. So basically, how did this impact you and what can we do to make it better is what we would like to get. So if you can fill that out, it would be great. If you need a pen, there's a whole box of pens right outside the door to my left, to your right in the corner on the table there. And right out that door to the left, there's our cardboard box that smells vaguely of coffee because that's where the coffee bags came in. But that would be there as well. And so if you could drop your survey in there afterwards, that would be helpful. Bunny is coming along with pens, so if anybody wants a pen. So she's got her black sweatshirt on. She's happy to do that in her pink glasses. So yes, but she'll do that. And I'm sorry, red glasses. Sorry, I'm not good with colors. Then the other thing I wanted to mention is when we're done here, everyone will be getting an email from us, just kind of recapping some of the things like Anna Trout was not able to stay, but she's going to send us her PowerPoint. So if you were in that and you want that information or you weren't in that and her information can be helpful, that will be there. I'll put a link to our community resource pack so that way you have a hard copy in your folder, but that way you can have a digital copy in case you want to pass it on to somebody else. And the contact for all the speakers will be on there as well. So if you said, I really wanted to talk to Mark Borse, not sure why, but if you really want to talk to Mark Borse, you can reach out to Mark. So there you are, and you'd appreciate that. So we'll have that for you, yes. So yeah, just want to make sure that you're aware of that. So I think that's all the housekeeping. Did I miss anything, Dave? Okay, good. Oh, and then again, resources up here. I'm sure they would like to take as little of this back with them. And remember, you have that beautiful Through the Valley bag you can take and shove all your stuff in and have that. So one person I want to introduce that had to come a little later because she had an obligation this morning, but Malou McKenzie. Can you stand, Malou, in the very back? Malou is our state representative, and I've appreciated that she has tried to be at as many. We're doing things for homelessness. We're doing things like mental health, and so I just appreciate Malou being here. If you have questions that you think that a state senator can help, state representative can help you with, then she'd be happy to help you in any way. So thank you for popping in, Malou, and being a part of things. So now is your chance. If you have questions, we're not going to have every panel member probably answer them because we don't have a lot of time. But if you have questions, we have some like pre-questions that we can ask them. But if you have a question that you'd like to ask the panel, I'm going to, actually, Danny, I am going to need that other microphone because Kevin's going to walk that around. And if you have a question, because I just remembered we have people that are watching us right now on YouTube, and they probably want to hear the question as well. So Kevin's going to walk around. If you have the question, if you can hold the microphone and ask the question. And then if you had it for a specific panel member or if it's just in general, please say that when you ask your question, okay? Who would like to be first? Who'd like to ask a question of our panel, our illustrious panel up here, and Mark? Bunny in the very back. There, you didn't have to walk for it, Kevin.
Hi, this is for any and all. I know one or two people had offered to share your PowerPoint. I don't know about y'all, but I can't be the only one with the bad eyes. Your PowerPoints were excellent. The words I could read. Is there any way to get access to some of your PowerPoints? And I mean, that's just a general overall question.
That's right, yeah. So that's you, Dave, apparently? Yes. Yes. Oh. If anybody can't, then you'll notice it missing on the email that's sent to you. Otherwise, our goal is to put that on the email that goes out. So thank you for the request there. Okay. That was the easiest one. So we have lots more time. Who else has a question? Over here. Kevin's also on staff here, so Derek had to get all of his steps in the first. Now Kevin is the second one to get his steps in. So, who had over there? Somebody, or right there. There you go.
I'm really going to muddy the waters here. But like one of the most prevalent issues that we're dealing with as a society is the gender dysphoria versus affirmation versus acknowledgement at birth. I don't know if anybody wants to, if that's a topic like for a future summit, but when we're, you know, kind of out in the public square with anybody under the age of like 30, okay? There's a questioning and an inquiry and how to kind of intersect in that space with evidencing Christ well and also with the mental health component. And I mean, I've got 4 adult children, ages 19 to 26, so I'm dealing with this like constantly.
Do you want to make any comments about that?
Yeah, that's a good thing to bring up. And, you know, I'll make a short comment, and I'll say just in short that anything that's mentionable becomes more manageable. And my meaning is that, you know, even if it's a complicated thing, even if it's a divisive thing, a lightning rod, you know, it's really important to find ways and spaces to talk about it. And if that's a part of your community, then it should be engaged with in a way that makes it, there can be some sort of relational problem-solving process that occurs. You know, I always say that there's 2 things that grow in the dark: mushrooms, but problems too. Yeah.
I'll also just mention that I think an important question is, what is your role in the person's life? And what are they saying good help looks like for them, even if they don't put it that way? For example, there was a situation where someone was asking me, who was dealing with addressing some of those issues, wanted to get connected to a church. And so he wanted to know some of the different churches in the area. And he tried out some of the different churches we let him know about. He wound up staying at a church that actually had some different perspectives than he did around it, because that church loved him so well. And so my job, he wasn't looking for me to give my thoughts about those issues. He was looking for me to help him find community. And the community we helped him find were people who were really loving him well and could walk through these issues with him. So for me, as I'm being asked to come alongside different people, sometimes who are all on that continuum, it's helpful for me to say, what are you looking for? And what's my role? Because it may be a different role than somebody else in their life.
I'm just going to point out something you just said also. The church that he ended up with was the church that loved him well, in spite of the fact they didn't agree with everything that he was thinking or doing or with all of his decisions in life or behavior. And so I think that's also a chapter we can, or a page out of that book that we can take. Sometimes we feel like we have to correct people or set them straight or say, this is what God wants for you. And there may be a place for that. It's not usually the leading edge of it. Usually it's relational. And then as the relationship deepens, and Dave, you have a statement about respect is not the same as agree. Go ahead.
Respect is different than agreement. That's something that we have in Intersect, a multi-faith coalition, and that does not exist because we all agree with each other. We disagree about some of the most deeply held things any of us care about. But because we're trying to collaborate for the common good of the community when it comes to resources and other sort of work for the homeless, we need to learn how do we collaborate amidst that disagreement. And one of the things really helpful to us is this notion that respect is different than agreement. As a Christian, I respect you because you're made in God's image, not because I find all of your perspectives are ones that I share or that I don't actually strongly disagree with at times.
Okay, thank you. Who's next? Question for the panel. Otherwise, I have to throw them all my questions, which are really hard. No, just kidding. Yes. Anyone else? Questions that you have for the panel? Yes, Toby wants to say something. He has a question for the panel.
So that question was obviously for those guys. As a lifelong pastor, I would just like to read something, if that's okay. To after I say no thanks, I don't want to update my app. Why is it that always happens when you need your phone? Okay, so I just want to read something to. I'm just going to read it to answer the lady's question. I'm going to just blame it all on God. Okay. Tremendous answers of respect. Blessed is the man, the person who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scoffers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord. And on his law does he meditate day and night. He's like a tree planted by the streams of water that yields its fruit in its season. Its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but are like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked shall perish. Strong words and perhaps too applicable to the question, but simply that we do have a compass. There should be great respect all around. But, God and what he has said is sure, and it is our compass.
Other question? Oh, yes. I'll just give you mine.
I'm wondering, in terms of, as a unified, almost a faith group, how has God demonstrated in your life, your ministry, that you maintain a sense of hope and optimism?
Lauren.
That's a very good question. So I'll speak just personally. When I'm counseling someone, and I do so from a biblical perspective, what I find is that there are times that I'm challenged, but I love it because it keeps me on my toes and it keeps me coming back to the feet of God. And so he strengthens me through my weakness. And so counseling for me has been a time when I'm seeing myself, okay, Lord, I need you to meet me where I'm at right here. And so it's been helpful for me to remember that I'm just leading another blind beggar to the Lord, right? So that's generally like how I would answer that question.
There's an interesting connection. I wanted to share something John said at the last session we did together. I haven't shared I shared about our experience with our son and his mental illness, but I also have MS, multiple sclerosis. And a lot of people say you shouldn't let something define you. And it's true. But what I say about that is my MS defines who God is. God is revealed in so many ways with MS. MS is a lot like somebody who has mental illness. It's like a ticking time bomb. There are no guarantees. All of a sudden, you're not in control. Truthfully, no one's really in control. But it's more obvious when somebody has mental illness, clearly when somebody has MS. My disease kind of takes over. It does what it wants to do at times. But I'm thankful because, kind of like what you were saying, God shows up. I have more opportunities to see God's faithfulness. He helps me think. He gives me the energy. He gives me protection when I need it. He guides me, gives me wisdom. He uses me against all odds, against what my body can do or can't do. So to answer your specific question, the more I see of God, the more I have hope. And he speaks to me in his word. He speaks to me in creation. A lot of people we were talking about go for walks. And God is so real. And you can't deny the hope that he offers. He's the God of all hope.
Just really quick in passing, our hope is that there's a better day coming and that all the wrongs will be made right by Christ.
I just want to piggyback on what you said around your own experience and how that it doesn't define you, it defines who God is. And so I do other things in life, but I spend a lot of time in the realm of homelessness, which is really hard. And it's really hard. For about 2 years, I used to go first thing on Sunday morning down into Norristown under a railroad bridge where some people were staying, and I called it First Church. I would go to my second church, which was in suburban Harleysville, very different sort of space. But under the bridge, I met a chaplain, Alejandro, and he said, it is good to go to church, but God wants us here. And so for a long time I did that. But what I've sort of learned is those hard spaces in our community, those hard spaces in people's lives, is where God is. God is here, but he's also in those spaces. And it's very easy for people to say, when bad things happen, where is God? Like that's a common thing that people think. And so in my experience, I see God in those spaces. And that's not a theoretical thing. It's what I see when I experience it. So in the same way that you said for your personal self, I think I see it in the community, in those liminal spaces, those marginalized spaces. God is there, and so that gives me hope, because it's not just a hard space. It is, but it's also a space where God exists and God works in sometimes ways I trip over it, or I bump into it. I'm like, wow, this is an evidence that God is active in this space, and that's hopeful.
Someone else? Over here, Rhoda.
From the microphone. I wanted to share something and then also ask a question. We've been seeking counsel for ourselves as my fiance and I have 4 adult children. He and I have tried to navigate for the last 8 years together how to help them, how to reach them, how to give them the support. But many crises, have taken our own strength to be able to continue to help them in our own strength, which also led us to sitting in our home often and not leaving and not knowing what would happen if we did leave. And we reached out for counsel, and sometimes I felt like I didn't know if it had to be Christian, and I'm a believer, and yet I was like, I don't know if that's an answer or if anyone that truly just cares can help meet our need. We searched and went in so many directions with doors closing for at least 2 years to come to the point of having to go a legal route for safety and for the fear of danger, to having one of my adult children removed from our home. And still now we're left sitting in those 4 same walls and not having the support that we need. So today I just came with an open heart to learn. And also, I think it's a way that I feel God is using our experience at some point to help others, yet my own heart is, we need the help, and we praise God and thank Him for bringing us to this community church in the last 4 months, because we have already seen the face of God through the people that have reached out to us. And I guess when I wanted to lose hope, I didn't recognize it in the terms of that, because I just thought it was me in our suffering. And I don't know why we didn't walk through the doors to come to any church. And when we came here, it was the first day that, or the once-a-year mental health panel was here. And once again, I was on this microphone. And I had kicked and screamed before we walked in here that I didn't want to go this day. And I just know God brought us here. So we're still in the depth of suffering and deep sorrow. But I can say the little things that I'm clinging to now is on my drive home, it's an hour drive, and I come home around 5 to 6 p.m. and I was just praying for God to just show me himself in this moment. And when I turned to the left, going down near the quarry near 29, the horizon was amazing. And all I could do was thank God for being, showing me he hears my cry. And our hope in him is that it is not ever going to be how I wanted it and envisioned life to be for my children or for our family. Yet I pray for restoration and reconciliation and healing. And when I just say God keeps showing up, there are people who I don't know them, they found my number and sent me a picture of our son that we haven't seen due to circumstances in 3 months. And it's just where God knew I needed to just know without being in relationship in that way. And all I can ever continue to do is thank God that he has angels on earth that are living his life out here for others. And when I listen to all your stories, it's encouraging to know that I'm not here alone in spirit. God is with us, and we all are human and will fail and fall, but he sends people to love us and to show who he is. And even when I am in the depths of sadness, I am just now learning to find joy when it doesn't feel good. So I guess the only question I really had was the difference between, does it need to be stated as a Christian therapist, counselor, if you are a believer? Do you only navigate in that direction? I'm assuming I would. That's all the question.
Do you want to answer?
Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. It was a powerful one, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that felt that as you were saying those words. You know, first thing that comes to mind for me is the story of the Good Samaritan. And, you know, it's a story that sort of illustrates that help does not always come in the form that you might expect. And so actually I'm someone that thinks that, you know, it's actually a good thing to keep an eye out and sometimes work what feels like you're stretching a boundary in terms of where that help is received from at times. I think it's important for people of faith to have a clinician, a therapist that can speak that language, you know, because it is like a pretty essential part of the story. And so if the therapist is like, looking at you like you have two heads when you start talking about God or, you know, faith ideas, that's probably a problem. But, you know, there's a lot of, in my experience, there's a lot of very talented healers out there that don't necessarily come from just a Christian perspective, but understand the truth, the value of ideas that probably transcend religion in a lot of ways, that are more close to God than they are necessarily an institution in ways. And so, yeah, I'm one that tends to encourage people to, you know, don't shut the doors just because it's they don't have Christian counselor on their website. in a way. In fact, it's one of the more common questions I get, are you a Christian counselor? And I say, well, why, yes, I'm a Christian and I am a counselor. You know, and then I think to myself, you know, what that means, though, you know, between what you mean and what I mean, that could be a long discussion between the two of us. And usually the people that press me on it, I say, why don't we spend 55 minutes together and you'll probably have a sense of if I'm your guy or not, in a way. And so that's another good way to approach things.
I think there's also probably strengths and weaknesses of different approaches. I'm reading a book right now on 4 views of Christians in psychology, in which, you know, there are models that are integrationist models, that are trying to take what Scripture has to say and integrating it with the best of what the mental health field can bring. There's types of counseling that's straight biblical counseling that's trying to say, how does Scripture speak to this issue, and less integration, more focus on just, are you really listening to what the Spirit's saying through Scripture? And so I think I've met people along that continuum who've done some of those different models really well, and certain other people where I'm not sure they've done it as well. And so this isn't exactly your question, but I think there's also wisdom in not feeling like whichever counselor you choose, you have to stick with that person, but that sometimes it helps you realize, actually, what I'm looking for and what I need right now, I'm really strong on this part, I need more of that. I'm really strong on that part, I need more of this. And to do so in concert with, you know, leadership from your local church and thinking through that. That's just some practical things I've found helpful. There's somebody who's going to say.
That's a very good question that you asked. And so I would say one of my favorite things about being a Christian counselor is what I call biblical worldview integration. And there are some people who are really looking for that, figuring out how they can take the truths of the Bible and apply that to their lives. And so for some people, they need that. They need that as an integral part of their recovery and healing process. And I also think that the Lord, in his grace and goodness to us, gives us common graces where there are people out there who are clinicians and professionals who aren't Christians, but they're very good at what they do. And so I think that the Lord leaves it up to us. We can certainly seek his wisdom and try and figure out what is the best path for us forward. But there's also a lot of really wonderful things to be had in the secular realm, and then we take on the responsibility of making sure that we're chewing up the meat and spitting out the bones.
I would just say with us, with Amy and I, that I come from a background where John comes from that was extremely biblical counseling based. To the exclusion of secular counseling. And I think that is changing over the years. Some groups like CCF and ACBC, Biblical Counseling, are recognizing the medical component, especially in the biological component in this. And I love what you said about, you know, eat the chicken, spit out the bones. And our counselor, it was so helpful that she was a believer, and she prays with us at the end of every session, but she is a secular therapist that can bring to the table, I mean, in her group, there's an RN that she brings to the table, as well as some things, amygdala things. Am I pronouncing that correctly, James? Great. Things that are actually medical and so that are very helpful, extremely helpful. Well, this is happening because there's actually something going on that is biological, and that helps a lot. Eat the chicken, spit out the bones.
There you go. There's the theme. Okay. Well, it is noon, and I told you I'd be done on time. So remember the survey. If you can fill that out, that would be wonderful. And then also, if I didn't mention this a moment ago, all the the sessions were in the auditorium, there was 3 of them. Those will be on our YouTube, UPCC films on YouTube. That will also send that information. We send that email out to you all. So within the next week or so, keep your eyes out for an email from us. If you don't get it, sometimes mass emails end up in your junk or other ones. So just reach out to us. We'll make sure that you get it in a means that you can be able to open it and things. So I'm going to pray and wrap up our time. Thank you again. Big thank you to all of our speakers that were here. Appreciate what they've done. And when I went into planning this, my big word is this. I hope that all of you are leaving here with some hope, that you learned something, you connected with somebody, you heard a verse, something along the way that gives you hope about whatever that next is. That was really my prayer. So I hope that has taken place in each of your lives here today. So let's pray. Father, thank you. We all come from such vast different walks of life. Some of us are here in professional situations. Some of us are here just as lay people that want to help folks. Some come with heavy, burdened hearts, Lord, because of situations they're currently involved in right now, Lord. And wherever we're at in that gamut, or even what I didn't mention, I'm grateful because I believe each person you brought here, there was a purpose and a plan for them. So as we leave here today, Lord, I pray that we will have hope, that we'll be able to tap into resources, that we'll realize that we have a network, that as we look around the room, we can see other folks who have experienced at some level mental health challenges and have answers on how we can try to figure out what the next is. We ask all of this in your precious name. Amen. Again, remember to grab the documents up here, any of the handouts. Have a great day. Thank you. Fill out the survey. Thanks for coming, Bob.
Thanks for having me.
How'd you hear about this?